Chapter 332. Gong Yimo saw that Longqing Wuji was deep in thought. She continued, "Perhaps you don't understand. When I left, I promised to give you a good idea to complete the transportation route between Luyi and Yuheng. But now, I want to interfere. My idea will only be beneficial to you, Luyi." "For example?" Longqing Wuji stared at her and asked. "For example, if we set up 18 medium-sized horse farms on the road I came from, the merchants from Dayu State would not need to hire guards. As long as they were entrusted to the horse farms of the three countries and paid a transportation fee, they would be able to transport the goods along with the people. The horse farms would not only allow the horses to be replaced, they would also be given time to rest. They would also be provided with lodging and food, so they would not have to sleep in the wilderness. On normal days, the horse farms could also be used to train riding and produce horses. There are countless benefits." Gong Yimo carefully observed Longqing Wuji's expression. Although he was expressionless, he was definitely tempted. She couldn't help but use a bewitching tone to continue. "From Dayu State to Luyi, or from Luyi to Dayu State, the number of horses would be maintained at a balance point. When the time comes, the national defense between the countries could also set up a tax point. I believe that in the future, it would be a considerable amount of income." Of course, there were many other benefits she did not mention. After all, if one wanted to know those, they would have to pay a price. But for now, it was enough that they could reach an agreement. This was also her biggest goal in coming to Luyi. Finding trouble with Longqing Ting Shui was just a side trip. Longqing Wuji heard and did not directly refuse. Instead, he looked at Gong Yimo with a pair of bright eyes. He sighed in his heart. She was really a treasure. This matter is of great importance. Why don't you enter the palace for a chat? When Longqing Ting Shui saw that the two of them were chatting happily, she was furious. "Imperial brother, you." Longqing Wuji glanced at Longqing Ting Shui. Gong Yimo also pushed Longqing Ting Shui to the front. "This matter can also be discussed here, and her matter can also be resolved together." "What is it?" Forgive Longqing Wuji for being so engrossed in his thoughts right now that he had completely forgotten about his sister. Gong Yimo smiled faintly. "She offended me. You haven't compensated me yet." Longqing Wuji suddenly felt that something was wrong. Gong Yimo smiled. "The idea I told you just now was based on the mutual benefit of the three countries. But you, Luyi, still owe me an explanation. So, shouldn't you give me some benefits?" She finally showed her claws and fangs at this time. Longqing Wuji immediately turned serious. If Gong Yimo demanded an exorbitant price, he would rather give up on this attractive deal than give the Dayu State the chance to exploit him. Gong Yimo felt Longqing Wuji's body suddenly tense up and could not help but soften her tone. "Why are you so nervous? It's not that hard for you to do it." If he believed her, then he should be prepared to be eaten clean. This strange thought flashed through Longqing Wuji's mind. He asked cautiously, "What do you want?" Thinking of something, he smiled ambiguously. "How do you want this prince to compensate you?" Gong Yimo glanced at Longqing Ting Shui, as if she was estimating her value. "It's actually very simple." Gong Yimo thought for a moment before saying, "I'll take care of all the horse farms and relay stations on this road." Longqing Wuji was shocked. She was blatantly planting a spy? One had to know that there were occasionally foreigners who settled down between countries. But once they settled down, they had to change their household registration. And Gong Yimo actually meant that the people in the relay stations still belonged to Dayu State. How was that different from being a spy? Gong Yimo saw his stern expression and could not help but say it again. "Don't be so nervous," she sighed and frowned slightly. "Can't you open your mind a little? Why don't you think about it? Once the four countries are connected, those horse merchants will discover the business opportunity of transferring goods from the south to the north. If they want to expand, how could they not set up a fixed store? If Luyi came to Dayu State to set up a store to purchase silk, would our Dayu State force him to change his household registration? That's true, but if there are too many people like this, wouldn't there be the danger of a large number of assassins sneaking in?" Longqing Wuji hit the nail on the head. Gong Yimo said, "In the beginning, there will definitely be mutual supervision. Moreover, not everyone has the qualifications to set up a store in another country. The size of the store, the amount of money coming in and out, All of these need to be strictly controlled. Gong Yimo looked at him seriously. Once the 4 countries are connected, this is an inevitable trend. The various legal systems will definitely follow. And I'm only taking the first step. Don't tell me you want to cut off this possibility, unless you don't want to establish diplomatic relations. Allow this prince to think about this carefully. He rubbed the space between his eyebrows and said in a low voice, "Don't think about it. At most, you can just send people to keep an eye on it. Moreover, although these relay stations belong to me, other than the main person in charge, the workers will still be locals. What problems will there be? This is my only request. Won't you consider it?" Gong Yimo struck while the iron was hot. She lowered her voice and discussed with him, "As long as you agree, I promise that I won't say a word about your younger sister being violated by her uncle. Moreover, I'll even hand Chakran over to you. After all, this is your family's matter." Her words were full of meaning. Longqing Wuji thought about it carefully. What she said was true. Once the trade was connected, as time passed, there would definitely be foreign merchants stationed there. Gong Yimo could be the first. Anyway, he would keep an eye on it and see if it was feasible. Moreover, would he be afraid that he couldn't deal with a few Dayu state people in his territory? Moreover, Chakran had to come back. He represented that someone was eyeing his position. The most important thing now was to find out the mastermind behind the scenes. Therefore, he nodded in the end. Gong Yimo immediately beamed with joy. "Then we can talk about other things in detail. This matter is settled just like that?" Longqing Wuji looked at her helplessly. She actually discussed such an important matter with him at this kind of place, at the city gate. This was not a small matter. Once it was done, this ancient road would continue to be passed down, and its name would be passed down through the ages. However, when he thought about it, out of the 18 relay stations, their Luyi would at most be given 7. Therefore, Gong Yimo could only open 7 relay stations in Luyi. But it was only 7. If she wanted to open them, she could open them. However, he would never have thought that the hotel chain that provided food, lodging, and transportation, the Holy Land for rich merchants, would take the first step after he nodded his head. This would create the glorious Golden Road in the future. How many people would see business opportunities here? How many people would rise on this road? The Golden Road would become a veritable road to wealth in the future. Chapter 333. Then, can you follow this prince into the palace now? Longqing Wuji smiled and gestured for her to enter. His gaze was fixed on her hand that was holding Longqing Ting Shui, indicating that she should let go. Gong Yimo rubbed her head and smiled. "You can guarantee my safety, right?" Longqing Wuji smiled but didn't say anything. He was the son of Eagle, not that puppet Emperor Yu Qi. Gong Yimo pointed at Longqing Ting Shui and said, "What if she takes revenge on me?" Longqing Ting Shui was furious. "Gong Yimo, don't push your luck." Gong Yimo looked frightened and shrunk her neck. She looked timidly at Longqing Wuji, implying that his sister was so fierce. Why didn't he give her a guarantee? Longqing Wuji looked majestically at his furious sister. When she became obedient, he promised, in Luyi, "You can come to this prince for anything that happens." Gong Yimo then let go of Longqing Ting Shui. "Then it would be impolite for me to refuse." Once Longqing Ting Shui was free, she didn't care about anything else and ran to the old Luyi king. Her tears flowed as if she had suffered a great grievance. The old Luyi king and the old princess consort hurriedly came down to welcome her. They hugged Longqing Ting Shui and felt heartache. Her good daughter was not only rejected by the people of Dayu State who didn't know what was good for her, but also met with such an incident on the road. Her heart was aching to death. The worst thing was that her daughter was back, and the culprit was being protected by her own son, so she couldn't do anything. Thinking of this, she resented her son a little, feeling that he was siding with outsiders. Longqing Ting Shui's head was resting on the old princess consort's body. Her eyes flashed with a fierce light, and she sobbed softly, "Mother, this person humiliated me. We can't let her live." The old princess was stunned. Looking at Gong Yimo and her son chatting happily, she could not help but feel a little troubled. From the looks of it, Gong Yimo seemed to have a good idea that could benefit Lu Yi. She could not possibly find trouble with Gong Yimo at this time, right? Gong Yimo was relieved after getting Longqing Wuji's promise. She trusted Longqing Wuji on this point. He was a man of his word and had a good reputation in the 4 countries in her previous life. In short, no matter how angry Long Chengting Shui and the others were, Gong Yimo still successfully entered the palace. Moreover, she was welcomed in with the etiquette of a distinguished guest. This almost made Long Chengting Shui grit her teeth. Seeing Gong Yimo lead her people away, Long Chengting Shui loudly said, "Mother, was he going to let her off just like that? Why don't you see what a vixen she is? In Dayu State, she didn't even let go of her own younger brother. Now, she's bewitching imperial brother." The old princess consort said awkwardly, "But your brother, mother." Long Chengting Shui unwillingly stomped her feet and looked at the old king Lu Yi. "Imperial brother usually listens to you the most. Father." She looked at the old king Lu Yi with teary eyes. The old king Lu Yi would definitely not interfere with his son's business. When they wanted to catch her at the beginning, they did not expect Gong Yimo to come with the idea of helping Lu Yi prosper. However, seeing his daughter so sad, he could not bear it. After all, Long Chengting Shui was his daughter that he got when he was 50 years old. Normally, she was more important than his eyes. "Ting Shui, don't worry." The white-haired old king Lu Yi looked in the direction that Gong Yimo and Longqing Wuji left and said in a deep voice, "If there's a chance, I, your father, will definitely seek justice for you." Seeing that he was being perfunctory, Long Chengting Shui rolled her eyes and said while sobbing, "Big brother values her, because she can provide strategies. When she tells us the details, father, you must kill her." As she spoke, she added another dose of strong medicine. "You must know that she has a sharp weapon that even Dayu State's emperor covets. If she dies, it will be best for our Lu Yi. At most, we will become enemies with Dayu State. Do you think that I, Lu Yi, will be afraid of Dayu State?" It had to be said that Long Chengting Shui was smart. However, she used her intelligence to harm others. Every word she said to sow discord was on point. When the old king Lu Yi heard this, he felt that it made sense. After she told him the entire plan, he would kill her. Moreover, if Gong Yimo died, no one would be able to obtain the legendary sharp weapon on her. Then, even if Lu Yi offended the Dayu State, what was there to be afraid of? After all, Gong Yimo's threat level, in some cases, was even stronger than the Dayu State. At this moment, he was really thinking about this problem. Seeing this, Long Chengting Shui was happy in her heart. "Gong Yimo, you're dead meat. Lu Yi is not the Dayu State. I will let you die a splendid death." When Gong Yimo arrived at the Lu Yi Palace, Sikong and the rest went arrest. As for her, she was personally led to the residence by King Lu Yi. "We'll talk about the details tomorrow. I'm so tired today." When she saw the place, Gong Yimo said tiredly. She thought of something in her hand that was about to open the door paused. "You won't wake up tomorrow and find your head separated from your body, right?" She looked at King Lu Yi suspiciously. Long Chengting Wuji laughed. He realized that in front of Gong Yimo, he was always very easy to laugh. "Don't worry and sleep. If you're still worried, why don't you come to my bedroom and sleep together?" Gong Yimo shivered in disgust. "Forget it. If I sleep with you, your sister will say that I'm the reincarnation of a fox charm and came here to seduce you. Isn't that the case?" Long Chengting Wuji suddenly moved closer. His body had the smell of sunshine. Even in the winter, it gave people the feeling of the scorching sun. At this moment, his deep eyes were lowered. When his beautiful eyes were close, Gong Yimo even felt that the blue in his eyes was deeper than the sea. Although it was very beautiful, it was just admiring. She pushed Long Chengting Wuji. "If you have something to say it properly. Don't come so close." Long Chengting Wuji blocked her at the door and said in an extremely domineering manner, "You're seducing me, ah? Did you forget the first time we met? How you treated me in?" The word in his deep voice had a kind of bewitching feeling. Gong Yimo also laughed. "What did I do to you? How come I don't remember? Right now, I want to go in and rest. Move aside." After saying that, She pushed the door open. But even though she moved quickly, enchanting Wuji was also fast. He forcefully squeezed into Gong Yimo's room and pushed Gong Yimo against the door with a backhand. This kind of teasing action made Gong Yimo's face turn cold. She calmed down and said dangerously, "If I were you, I would definitely not do something like playing with fire." Enchanting Wuji also laughed. "Don't worry, I have no interest in a little bean sprout like you." Little bean sprout? Gong Yimo laughed. "So it turns out that the person with such beautiful eyes is actually blind. Then what are you doing, forcing your sister's mother to misunderstand me? Do you think that I'm not dying fast enough?" Enchanting Wuji's muscular body once again pressed closer. He stared at her with a kind of domineering and overbearing pressure. This prince only wants to return the nameplate. Gong Yimo laughed and used her strength to push him away. Seeing him take a few steps back, Gong Yimo revealed a languid smile. "Nameplate don't worry, I've already prepared to return it to you. But you'll have to wait until I go back." Enchanting Wuji narrowed his eyes dangerously. "Gong Yimo, don't be so ungrateful. This is Lu Yi." Gong Yimo laughed. "What a coincidence. I'm famous for being ungrateful." After saying that, she spread out her hands and said with a kind of infuriating tone, "What can you do to me?" Chapter 334. Seeing Gong Yimo like this, Longqing Wuji gritted his teeth in anger, wishing he could give her a good beating. "Gong Yimo, do you know that sometimes you are especially infuriating?" She yawned. She was really sleepy. "If you don't leave now, I will anger you to death. Do you believe it?" Saying that, she pulled the door open. "Hurry up and leave. With your name tag, my life in Lu Yi will be guaranteed. Don't worry, I will return it to you when I leave. I mean what I say." Longqing Wuji narrowed his eyes and said indifferently, "So you already knew that this day would come and purposely took away my name tag?" Longqing Wuji seemed to have discovered something. "You already wanted to come to Lu Yi?" Gong Yimo's expression was calm, without a trace of embarrassment from being exposed. "I don't know what you are talking about. If you don't leave now, I will shout that you are molesting me." Longqing Wuji took a few steps forward. The danger in his eyes seemed to have materialized. "Gong Yimo, and Lu Yi, you better not play any tricks. And don't have any bad intentions. Otherwise, what if it's a good thing?" Gong Yimo suddenly raised her head and interrupted him. At such a close distance, he could clearly see that there was no evil in her eyes, only sincerity. Longqing Wuji was suddenly stunned. Gong Yimo deliberately wanted to do good things in Lu Yi? Don't tease him. She was a ruthless person who ate people without spitting out their bones. A little wild horse who wanted a yard after taking an inch. Gong Yimo smiled faintly. She really came with good intentions, but even if she said it, he wouldn't believe her. She was too lazy to say it, so she just asked, "King Lu Yi, this little girl knows that you are ambitious. Then can you tell this little girl, why are you so eager to do business with Yuang?" Speaking of this, Longqing Wuji's face showed some hesitation. Gong Yimo said it for him. "Every winter is the hardest time, right? I walked from Lu Yi all the way to Huacheng. It's still okay under the emperor's foot, but the more bitter the place, the more people don't have enough to eat. So most of them stay at home and don't move, to reduce consumption. In many places, they only have one meal a day, and you want to change this situation. So you want to build an ancient horse road to buy food in Yuheng in winter, right?" Longqing Wuji suddenly took a step back, not daring to look at her. After all, she saw his family starving, and even said it. It was really embarrassing for him as the king. Gong Yimo's gaze. "What's there to be embarrassed?" Gong Yimo said indifferently. "You actively take care of the people's livelihood. Unlike your brother, who wants to use war to plunder, you want to develop trade. From this, I can see that you are a good leader." Her direct praise actually made Longqing Wuji's heart explode with joy for a moment. But he held it in, and still looked at Gong Yimo seriously, with a probing look, as if he was considering the truth of her words. Gong Yimo looked at him, striking while the iron was hot. She asked, if I can solve Lu Ye's food problem, how will you thank me?" Longqing Wuji laughed. How about giving yourself to me? He didn't take Gong Yimo's words to heart. If it was solved that way, his ancestors wouldn't have worked so hard to take over the Central Plains. The Central Plains was rich, but those weak people occupied the most fertile land in the mainland. To be able to eat their fill, wear warm clothes, and have ample food, their Lu Yi also wanted these. Gong Yimo saw that he didn't believe her, but she wasn't angry. She just said, "Actually, I don't really agree with Lu Ye's ancestors' way of thinking. Do you think that as long as you take over the Central Plains, there will be endless food coming in? That's too naive." Longsheng Wuji smiled a little cruelly, looking at her with eyes sharper than an eagle's. "Since we've already taken over the Central Plains, why can't we take the people of the Central Plains as slaves and make them cultivate food?" Gong Yimo didn't get angry when she heard him say that, and said slowly, "Give a man a fish, and you feed him for a day. Teach a man to fish, and there's nothing more reliable than holding it in the palm of your hand. Sometimes, you can't even rely on yourself, and you still want to rely on others?" Her words made Longsheng Wuji ponder deeply. "What are you trying to say?" He looked at Gong Yimo. "Or, do you really have a way?" When he asked this, he didn't believe it at all. Gong Yimo was a princess after all. Even if she was smarter than normal people and thought of all kinds of ways to build transportation, he didn't think that she knew much about the hardships of the people. But what he didn't know was that not only did Gong Yimo understand, but she also knew about the hardships of the people and even created a hellish world single-handedly. The chances are 50 to 50. She thought of something and said in a melancholy tone, "I'm also not very confident. Let's see what price you can pay." Daiyu State's princess always did what she said. Was she saying a trap, or was there really such a thing? Longsheng Wuji couldn't help but think deeply. This question is too important. This prince can't answer you now. Gong Yimo grinned. "It's fine. It's almost the new year. I still want to spend it with you. The future is long." Then she pointed outside. "There is a way, but if you don't let me rest now, I definitely won't be able to think of it. When the time comes, the one who will lose out will definitely not be the rich Daiyu State." Longsheng Wuji had the urge to bite her again, grinding his teeth. Forget it. She must be tired from the long journey. Since that's the case, I won't ask her. Just like what she said, the future is long. After Longsheng Wuji left, Gong Yimo heaved a sigh of relief. This kind of person who was born with a strong aura, it was very stressful to communicate with. Of course, no matter what, she wasn't afraid. As for solving the food problem, Gong Yimo wasn't just talking about it. She really had a certain degree of confidence in doing so. But before doing so, she had to consider a problem. One was the domestic problem of Daiyu State, and the other was the foreign problem. Let's not talk about the country first. Let's talk about Lu Yi. Lu Yi already had a strong army. If there was no shortage of food, would they settle down and live their own lives and work in peace and contentment? Or would they expand their ambition to conquer the Central Plains and conquer the world? She still had the military in her hands, so she wasn't afraid of Lu Yi going to war, but she didn't want to go to war. She wanted the four countries to be in a stable and self-sufficient state, just like the countries in the future. She didn't want to go to war. In the end, it all boiled down to the problem of the people's livelihood. The reason why people went to war was because of greed and their own lack of resources, just like Lu Yi. They lacked food, and the people didn't have enough to eat, so naturally, they would have evil thoughts. This was the root of evil. What if the people were rich? Everyone had enough food and clothing, and the country was self-sufficient. Who would be willing to leave their homeland to spy on others? On such a relatively stable basis, as long as there was a good lead, the countries would work hard to develop their own advantages and make up for their disadvantages, so that they wouldn't fall behind each other. Then, they would be able to form a win-win situation. When all the hard work would be rewarded, who would have the time to start a war? Did they think that their lives were too easy? Of course, it was still too early to say all these. Moreover, there was a limit, and timing was very important. Being too hasty would only backfire, so she had to think carefully and seize the opportunity. Therefore, she slept very soundly, all the way until the sun was high in the sky. Chapter 335. When she woke up, she washed up and someone brought her food. The servant girl knelt down in front of Gong Yimo and lowered her head. "My lady, it's time to eat." Gong Yimo smelled the food from afar and walked over in a daze. She picked up her chopsticks and prepared to eat. It seemed like King Lu Yi had specially instructed that the food was to follow the style of Dayu state. "Have the people I brought eaten?" Gong Yimo asked casually. The servant girl lowered her head and said, "They have their own courtyard and used the food they brought to cook. They've already eaten." Gong Yimo's hand paused and she couldn't help but sweat. The people trained by Gong Dai were much more vigilant than her. She felt around in her sleeves and took out a silver hairpin. The servant girl saw that she was going to use the hairpin to test for poison and didn't say anything. Gong Yimo tested it and the hairpin didn't change color. The servant girl heaved a sigh of relief and didn't say anything. Seeing that the servant girl was so nervous that she clutched her clothes tightly, Gong Yimo smiled and stood up. The servant girl panicked. "But you haven't eaten." "I'm not eating. I'll eat with your king in the future." She actually threw down her chopsticks and ran away. Lu Ye's palace wasn't big. The entire palace was built with huge yellow stones and was called the Golden Fort. Although it wasn't as graceful as a small bridge and flowing water, it wasn't as exquisite as a cornice, but it was rough and had a different kind of beauty. When Gong Yimo arrived, Longqing Wuji hadn't eaten yet. He was still reading documents and his eyes were dark. It seemed like he must have interrogated Chakran last night. After all, this was the most important thing. Lu Yi was a country made up of many tribes. There were 3 big clans, and the change of kings was very common. So there had always been only King Lu Yi and no Emperor Lu Yi. In addition, Longqing Wuji had just taken the throne not long ago, and the centralization of power wasn't stable. It was no wonder that he racked his brains every day and didn't smile. But it didn't matter. Gong Yimo believed that if he was given time to grow, Lu Yi would become an emperor sooner or later. Seeing that Gong Yimo was requesting an audience, King Lu Yi realized that it was already past mealtime. His waist was hurting a little. He had not rested for the entire night, so he was very dispirited. However, when he saw Gong Yimo, the dispiritedness on his face disappeared and was replaced with caution and shrewdness. He did not want to be taken advantage of by this little girl from Dayu State again. "What are you doing here?" Longqing Wuji kept a straight face, but in his heart, he was thinking that he would sleep after eating. What should he eat? Gong Yimo naturally didn't know what he was thinking. Looking at his dignified face, she didn't know why, but he was somewhat similar to Gong Chung. She pursed her lips and smiled. "After thinking about it, I feel that it's not safe at my place. So I've decided that while I'm in Lu Yi, I want to freeload at your place, 2 meals a day." Longqing Wuji was a little stunned. He would usually go to his woman's place for dinner. Although he hadn't married Flower Boat Wuyo yet, he still had a lot of women. This way, he looked at Gong Yimo and pondered. Was this little girl intentionally seducing him? If Gong Yimo knew what he was thinking, she would definitely vomit blood. In this palace, there were 3 people with high positions eyeing her covetously. She was only thinking about her own life, so she was willing to compromise. "Okay? I came here hungry. You haven't eaten yet, right?" Gong Yimo looked at Longqing Wuji with a pair of big eyes. He couldn't help but stare blankly, then a trace of a smile flashed through his eyes. "No, but since you're here, this prince will bring you to try Lu Ye's specialty things." After saying that, he actually brought Gong Yimo out of the palace. The 2 of them urged their horses to gallop, with 2 guards following closely behind. Huacheng was the capital city newly built by Lu Yi. Because Lu Ye's king changed quickly, and Lu Yi was mostly nomadic, there weren't many people who settled down. The entire Huacheng wasn't big. Very quickly, they left the city and arrived at the boundless grassland. It was already the middle of the first month, which was the coldest time. So that kind of boundless greenery couldn't be seen, only desolation. Longqing Wuji stopped his horse. He also didn't know why he trusted Gong Yimo so much that he only brought 2 guards and brought her out. At this moment, he was sitting high on the horse's back, looking at the desolation. He said softly, "It's a pity that the time isn't right. In this place during summer, the tender grass is the most fertile. There are many people who will herd sheep, cows, and horses here." After saying that, A green ocean seemed to appear in his eyes. As far as the eye could see, the sky was blue and clear. The wind blew on his face. Swimming in it, there was an indescribable profoundness. Gong Yimo also seemed to think of that kind of beautiful scenery and said with a smile, "I think I will stay here until then, and then we will come out to horse race." Okay, horse race. Not knowing why, Longqing Wuji suddenly felt a little uncomfortable in his heart, so he only agreed to horse race and didn't promise her to go back. Gong Yimo touched her stomach again. After running for so long, "I'm starving. You are bringing me out to drink the wind?" Her face was hurting from the wind. "We're almost there." Longqing Wuji glared at her, snorted, and continued to lead the horse. Gong Yimo was helpless, thinking whether she should take some food from her space to eat. There seemed to be a piece of chocolate left. No, it would be gone if she ate it. Gong Yimo cried in her heart because she liked to eat. There were a lot of delicious food in her space. Most of them were snacks. But after so many years, although the ones she brought wouldn't spoil, there were only a few left. Finally, they arrived at a small tribe. The tribe was originally very quiet, but when they saw Longqing Wuji, everyone revealed a happy expression. Longqing Wuji looked at her with some pride. "This is the Cha-Er tribe. There are many warriors in the tribe. This king often competed with them when I was young." When he said this, his eyebrows were slightly raised, looking very domineering. But Gong Yimo knew his bitterness. Lu Yi had 3 great bloodline aristocratic families, Longqing Wuji, Huazhou, and Baiji. When he was young, the old Lu Yi didn't have any achievements, and the Baiji tribe took away his position as king. So even though Longqing Wuji had a noble status at that time, he still had to live a life of hiding. Later on, Baiji Lu Yi died an unnatural death, and the children of the Baiji family were weak and sickly. Many leaders then thought of Longqing Wuji's older brother, because although their family had fallen at that time, their bloodline was still noble. But his older brother was the kind of person who was muscular but simple-minded. He listened to other people's instigation and tried to kill his younger brother many times. So in the end, Longqing Wuji directly overthrew his older brother and succeeded. At this time, an old man came forward. He bowed to Longqing Wuji, his pair of old eyes looking at Gong Yimo with some puzzlement. Gong Yimo's appearance was also very good, but compared to them, there was still a big difference. Baiji Lu Yi waved his hand. "It's fine. This is my friend." Only then did they receive Gong Yimo warmly. Chapter 336. At noon, the whole tribe was very quiet. They were not rich. Only at night would they be a little more cheerful. There was no other way. The winter in Lu Yi was really long and hard to endure. But the arrival of King Lu Yi made the tribe livelier. Many young women came in to deliver food and stared at Longqing Wuji, not embarrassed at all. Old Cha-Er prepared meat and wine to personally serve Longqing Wuji. Longqing Wuji was their tribe's benefactor, and they all welcomed him. The fragrance of wine and meat filled the main tent, but only old Cha-Er accompanied Longqing Wuji to eat. Most of the people returned to their own tents after greeting them. It was not like summer now, and there was too little food. They couldn't afford to party with the entire tribe. Longqing Wuji felt a little uncomfortable. "Where are Rhodes and Weir?" Old Cha-Er sighed. It hasn't snowed recently, so they wanted to see if there was any prey. They haven't returned yet. What prey could there be at this time? There were only some wild beasts. Longqing Wuji fell silent, and the wine in his hand became tasteless. Old Cha-Er saw that he was in low spirits and smiled comfortingly. "It's been 2 years. It was harder in the early years, but didn't you get through it?" Longqing Wuji put down his wine cup. In front of old Cha-Er, he was as obedient as a child. "I'm useless." The old man waved his hand. "You can't say that. You are our tribe's benefactor, and you have done very well. Everyone remembers your kindness and believes that you can lead the Lu Yi people to glory." At this moment, he lowered his head slightly, feeling guilty. At this time, someone came in and whispered something in old Cha-Er's ear. It seemed that someone was sick. Old Cha-Er frowned and got up to leave. Because Longqing Wuji was familiar with him, there were not many restrictions between them. He waved his hand, and old Cha-Er left. Gong Yimo saw that he was in low spirits and asked with a smile, "Is this the delicious food you said you would treat me to?" Longqing Wuji came back to his senses and looked at the lamb in the middle. He felt a little conflicted and thought to himself that he would compensate him when he left. The lamb roasted by old Char's wife is the freshest. When I was young, he used the word I, and his expression was a little gloomy. When I was young, the thing I looked forward to the most in the winter was to be able to eat this during the holidays. Gong Yimo took a bite and sighed in her heart. She had to admit that it was delicious. There was a rank odor in the tent that could not be dispelled, but she did not know what she used to roast the lamb. It did not have any rank odor, and the meat was tender. It was a delicacy that you would never be able to eat. How is it? Seeing that Gong Yimo's eyes lit up, Longqing Wuji was a little proud. Is it Lu Ye's special delicacy? Without waiting for Gong Yimo's reply, he took a few bites himself. Suddenly, his expression became strange. It's a pity that you can't eat it often. Gong Yimo was also very clear that if it wasn't for Longqing Wuji's arrival, this kind of lamb would definitely not be killed. The value of raising it would be much higher than raising it now. You seem to be very familiar with this place? Gong Yimo asked curiously. Longqing Wuji didn't hide it from her. When I was young, I hid here for a few years. Old Char doted on me a lot. As he spoke, his expression suddenly darkened. I was very close to Old Char's sons. Originally, it wasn't just Rode and Weir. He also had a younger son who was the same age as me. His name was Bai Jia. He suddenly frowned and said faintly, "But one year, the winter was very cold, and there was very little food. It was also a war, so I hid here with the entire tribe. During the process, I survived, but he starved to death. Before he died, he always said that he was hungry. I fed him blood, but he still died. It was unknown if it was because of the scene, but Longqing Wuji unexpectedly recalled such a past event. Behind him, the two attendants revealed an unbearable expression. At that time, when Lu Yi was in turmoil, such things were not uncommon. So from that time onwards, I swore that even in the cold winter, all the people in Lu Yi would be able to eat their fill and wear warm clothes, just like the people in other countries. They wouldn't have to suffer so much." Gong Yimo lowered her head to eat her meat and didn't reply. At this moment, Longqing Wuji seemed to have made up his mind. He looked at her seriously and said in a low voice, "Yesterday, you said you had a solution. I didn't believe you and I couldn't answer you. But now, I can make a promise." Gong Yimo looked up at him and saw that he was staring at her with a burning gaze. The heat and aura around him were like the sun. He was definitely not an ordinary person. Every word he said was loud. "As long as you can solve this problem, solve the problem of Lu Ye's winter food shortage. As long as you don't ask me to betray my country and family, I will repay you in any way you want." Gong Yimo's eyes lit up and narrowed like a little fox. "I can't promise you anything, but if I can do it, can you really do it? If I go back on my word, I won't enter Eagle Deity Temple after I die." "Good." Gong Yimo patted his shoulder with her oily hand. "This is what I want. Come, let's eat." As she spoke, she tore a big piece of meat for him. Longqing Wuji was still feeling emotional. At this moment, he didn't really believe that Gong Yimo had a solution, but at least she had a solution. It was better than him not knowing what to do now. So the two of them ate the meat and drank the wine as if they were venting their anger. After eating and drinking to their fill, Longqing Wuji felt that the distance between him and Gong Yimo seemed to have closed up. He asked in a low voice, "I'm curious. You helped me so much about the horse passage. Yes, you also helped Yuheng a lot. But what good did that do to you and Dayu State?" He didn't mention that Gong Yimo wanted to solve the food problem. After all, it hadn't happened yet. As a man, he didn't want to put pressure on a little girl. Gong Yimo had drunk some wine. Old Cha-Er saw that they were chatting happily and didn't come in to disturb them. She became more impudent. At this moment, both her hands were oily and she was holding onto the meat as she spoke incoherently. "It doesn't do me any good." Longqing Wuji was happy. Gong Yimo was such a shrewd person, but she was so selfless. He didn't believe it even if he said it out loud. People's thoughts change. She ate the meat, but her eyes were staring at the fire in the tent. In the past, I thought that it would be good if I was rich. I had money and could do a lot of good things. Later, I realized that it was possible to do it alone, but the power was too small. So I instigated everyone to work hard and hoped that Daiyu State would be rich. Later, I understood what it meant to be the tallest tree in the forest. At that time, I thought that it would be good if everyone was rich. No one would have to worry about anyone else. Even the poorest people could use their own hands to live a good life. And now, she took a big bite of the meat and felt that she had found her ultimate goal in life. But she didn't say it out loud. Anyway, time would prove her thoughts. You just need to know that I'm sincerely helping you, Lu Yi, Gong Yimo said in a low voice. Sometimes, people have to be broad-minded and open-minded. Don't be afraid that others will surpass you if you help others. With tolerance and wisdom, many things can be a win-win situation. Unfortunately, Longqing Wuji didn't fully understand what she said. When she said it later, he finally understood what she meant by a win-win situation. Chapter 337. That night, Longqing Wuji's Divine Eagle Palace was in a heated argument. If it was a normal matter, it would have been fine. However, when Longqing Tingshui woke up from her sleep and told Wang Luyi about Gong Yimo whipping her, Longqing Duode was furious. He was already so old, yet he insisted on seeking justice from Gong Yimo. However, he was stopped by Longqing Wuji. That was why they were arguing. Wuji, that's your sister. The white-haired Duode slammed the table angrily. Beside him, the old Wang Fei was sobbing. Longqing Wuji was having a headache from their argument. He had kept this matter a secret because he was afraid they would cause trouble. Gong Yimo was in the wrong, but he knew his sister's personality. She must have done something. Now, they were complaining about her. Father, what do you want? Longqing Wuji was a little impatient. He did not have deep feelings for his parents, but he still respected them. However, that did not mean they could influence his decisions. Duode looked at his wife and said in a low voice, "This time, everyone who went to Daiyu State must be killed." Longqing Wuji was shocked. Ridiculous. Those people did not do anything wrong. Why should they pay for his sister's mistake? When Longqing Wuji roared, the two elders did not dare to say anything. However, when he thought of his crying daughter, Duode braced himself and said, "Those people are useless." When Tingshui was in Daiyu State, they did not want to help her. Otherwise, why would she be sent back? They could not even keep an eye on a woman on the road. It caused Tingshui to suffer such a thing. This last incident was even worse. Gong Yimo, a person from Daiyu State, whipped our Lu Ye's princess in front of them. They actually stood by and watched. Wuji, you still dare to use such a person? His words made Longqing Wuji feel uncomfortable. It was mainly because he was not there and did not know the truth. However, now that he heard it, he felt that Wuji did not do well. Duode struck while the iron was hot. His eyes flashed fiercely. Perhaps Wuji and the others have already been bribed by that woman called Gong Yimo. From what I see, she made it sound so dignified, saying that she wants to cooperate with Lu Yi. Who knows what she's selling in her gourd? It's winter now. She might be up to something by coming here. Longqing Wuji could not help but think of Gong Yimo's appearance when he was drinking with her in the afternoon. Her eyes were clear, without a hint of gloominess. Dodd's eyes narrowed slightly, and his old face was tense. It was extremely frightening. He continued to add fuel to the fire. Limitless. Don't forget that when Hua Zhou Wuyo came back, she said that she almost made it impossible for Gong Yimo to become a princess. Moreover, this time, Tingshui almost made Gong Yimo lose her reputation. She's just a woman. How can she not resent her at all? How could they still prioritize the country? I'm afraid that even Min can't be so free and easy. He clearly has ulterior motives. Enough. Longqing Wuji had not rested well in the first place, and his words made him even more annoyed. He did not want to suspect that Gong Yimo had ulterior motives, but in this position, when he heard such words, he had no choice but to put up his guard against her. After all, she was a citizen of Daiyu State. This prince has said before that I will protect her in Luyi. Don't mention her matters again. Dodd gritted his teeth, hating his son's stubbornness. Since you won't do anything to her, then Buji and the others should die. If they spout nonsense, Ting Shue's reputation will be tarnished. Who would be willing to marry a woman who was rejected by Daiyu State and humiliated by her own uncle? Are you forcing her to her death? Then he said gloomily, or you can try to deal with them. If they didn't collude with Daiyu State, Gong Yimo definitely wouldn't plead for them. If Gong Yimo really did plead for them, then there must be a conspiracy. At this moment, the old princess consort also started crying. Are you going to watch your sister suffer like this? Haven't you always doted on her? Although she was in pain, she had never been so troublesome in the past. Longqing Wuji gritted his teeth. None of them were easy to deal with. There's no need to talk about this anymore. This prince still has to go to Baiji's house tomorrow. Don't mention it again. With that, he sent the two of them away. He was not a muddle-headed person. Buji might have committed the crime of failing to protect his sister, but he did not deserve to die. Moreover, this was not the most important thing right now. Would his sister, King Luyi, still need to worry about marriage? But he never expected that the two of them would be so daring when he let his guard down. The next day, Gong Yimo was still asleep when someone shook her awake. She saw that it was a maidservant she had never met before. My lord. Not good. Father Wang wants to execute Sir Buji and the 1,000 attendants who came back from Daiyu State. Gong Yimo was shocked. Where's your king? The maidservant cried out. The king went to Baiji's house early in the morning. Gong Yimo felt a headache coming on. Then why are you looking for me? This is your country's family matter. The maidservant was stunned. But Sir Buji told me to look for you. He said that you would definitely have a way to save him. He also said that if you save him, he will definitely listen to you in the future. He is a good person. Please save him. Gong Yimo's originally dazed mind suddenly flashed with a ray of light. You have found the wrong person. What does the death of 1 or 1,000 Lu Yi people have to do with me, a citizen of Daiyu State? With that, she actually pulled her blanket and wanted to go back to sleep. My lord, the maidservant did not expect Gong Yimo to be so cold-hearted. She hesitated. Didn't she say that she took good care of Lu Yi and the rest? She even stood up for Lu Ye's maidservant. Why is she reacting like this? Finally, she gritted her teeth. My lord, please save him. This servant will go and beg other lords. If you change your mind, I will go to Heavenly Eagle Station. With that, she really left. Not long after, Sikong also came. When he arrived, Gong Yimo had already woken up. His expression was grave. Princess, I heard that the old Lu Yi king took advantage of the fact that Lu Yi went to the Baiji tribe to mobilize his private army to execute those Lu Yi people who came back from Daiyu State. Gong Yimo frowned slightly. This matter has nothing to do with us. If you want to kill them, then kill them. Sikong sighed. Before this subordinate came here, His Highness gave this subordinate the right to contact Lu Ye's spies. They just sent news that the old Lu Yi king had made 2 plans. If you go, he will frame Buji for colluding with you. If you don't go, he will tell the world that it was your idea to execute those 1,000 people. Because you were humiliated in Daiyu State when the stairway to heaven was broken, it was found that Buji colluded with the hidden sword sect. So this time, he used the excuse of cooperating with Lu Yi to force Lu Yi to kill them to give you an explanation. He also said that the hidden sword sect and Buji were warriors from the same sect. Therefore, Longqing's Ting Shui did not know anything about this. She was implicated when the engagement was broken. Chapter 338. Shameless. Gong Yimo had not met such people in a long time. It could be said that they had no bottom line. Were they trying to seize the opportunity to make a false accusation? Taking advantage of the fact that no one knew the truth, inverting black and white, and leaving a preconceived notion in the world? If she went, it would be impossible for a person from Daiyu to save someone from Lu Yi. She would not be able to explain herself. If she did not go, After their propaganda, Lu Ye's people would have a preconceived notion that she was unforgiving. Killing the mastermind was not enough, and she would not even let the innocent people off. That was a total of 1,000 people. Even if Longcheng Wuji returned, the matter had already happened. Would he announce the truth for an outsider like her? Would he say that Longcheng Ting Shui was the one who did the evil, and that it was Longcheng Ting Shui's responsibility to be sent back? Would Longcheng Ting Shui be the one who wanted to silence her? Was all this a trap set by his parents and sister to discredit her? Don't make me laugh. In the end, they were a family, and she was an outsider. Gong Yimo clenched her fists. She could not let them succeed. Otherwise, she would not be able to stay in Luyi. Even if she stayed, it would be difficult for her to move a single step. Also, she would not give Longcheng Ting Shui a chance to clear her name. Furthermore, she wanted to frame her and step on her to clear her name? Just wait and see. Princess, where are you going? Gong Yimo said without turning her head. I'm going to kill someone. Sikong was startled. He quickly gathered his brothers and followed Gong Yimo's lead. It was fine if this little ancestor wanted to kill someone, but if she hurt them, they would be in trouble. At this time, many people in Hua City had gone to Tianying Stage. This place was equivalent to Dayu State's market. At this time, it was full of people kneeling. Everyone's head was covered, and their faces could not be seen clearly. However, they all seemed to be injured. At this time, they were all kneeling there quietly without making a sound. Many people did not understand why so many people were kneeling on the stage. Could it be that they were going to kill them? On the high platform, other than a minister who presided over the proceedings, the old King Lu Yi, the old princess consort, and Ting Shui of Longcheng were all present. There were even more people below the stage. It was winter, and everyone didn't have much activity. So when they heard the commotion, they all came out to see what was going on. Lu Ye's citizens were not as restrained as Dayu State citizens. When they saw so many people kneeling on the stage, they couldn't help but ask, who are they? What crime did he commit? At this time, the presiding minister looked at the old King Lu Yi, stepped forward and sat on the main seat, trembling. He shouted loudly, "Quiet! Quiet!" The voices of the crowd gradually quieted down. This minister was a bit old and had a full beard. However, at this moment, his expression was dispirited, and he seemed to be in a difficult position. After a long while, he finally spoke. Yesterday, little Princess Lu Yi came back with Princess Gu of Dayu State. So the people were a bit confused. Although the news was sealed, they still knew that the little princess was sent back yesterday. However, they didn't know the inside story and couldn't make any deep guesses. This time, the little princess was sent back by Dayu State not because she was lacking, but because of these wicked servants. As Lu Ye's ministers and the princess's retinue, when they arrived in Dayu State, not only did they not help the princess choose a husband, but they also took revenge for their own selfish reasons. This angered the Dayu State's emperor. Everyone knows Tsongjian. I, Lu Yi, am the second bravest warrior. However, because his senior brother was killed by Princess Gu of Dayu State, he colluded with Ambassador Buji and framed Princess Gu of Dayu State, causing her reputation to be ruined. Therefore, the Dayu State's emperor was furious. So he sent the little princess back. Princess Gu of Dayu State also came and demanded an explanation from me, Lu Yi. When the people heard this, they all felt that this Dayu State's princess was a bit unreasonable. She killed people first, and her reputation was ruined so easily. It must be because she was lacking in her own body. After all, flies don't bite a seamless egg. Seeing that many people were unhappy, the minister continued, Princess Gu of Dayu State is also here for the cooperation between the two states. She said that we will talk about cooperation after an explanation is given. Therefore, in order to appease Princess Gu of Dayu State's anger, Father Wang has decided to execute these 1,000 people. His words caused a huge uproar. Why should we execute them? Someone shouted in dissatisfaction. Can't we just execute the mastermind? That's right. Dayu State is too much. The little princess was implicated for no reason, and we haven't even settled the score with them. How dare they push their luck? Bah. What Princess Gu of Daiyu State? She's obviously not a good person. Is she trying to threaten Lu Yi with the cooperation? We can't kill them, not a single one of them. We want that Princess Gu of Daiyu State to get out of Lu Yi. Princess Gu of Daiyu State to get out of Lu Yi. The people were all angry. In the end, they shouted until their faces turned red, and their voices became louder and louder. Long Cheng's Ting Shui, who was sitting on the stage, smiled faintly. She wanted to act first and report later. She wanted to seize the opportunity. So what if Brother Wang was angry? Father Wang and Mother Empress were still there. On the other hand, Gong Yimo's reputation would be ruined, and she would be sent back to Daiyu State with her tail between her legs. What cooperation? She, Lu Yi, didn't need it. Seeing how angry the people were, many people on the stage were also twisting their bodies to resist. However, their heads were covered with linen, so their expressions couldn't be seen. Therefore, the people below the stage just thought that they were angry and were crying out for their own injustice. The minister in charge sighed. No matter how angry the people were, he had to kill these people, because only with their deaths could Gong Yimo's crime be established. Moreover, the angrier the people were, the happier the little princess would be. Now, they just had to kill these people before Gong Yimo arrived. Previously, they heard that she wasn't coming. It was good that she wasn't coming. Carry these 1,000 lives on your back and go back to Daiyu State. Execute. 10 executioners stepped forward. Lu Ye's execution was different from Daiyu State's. They didn't need to behead him. Just a stab to the heart would be enough. Moreover, they would start from the lowest status. They would make the leader of the criminals feel the fear of death and repent. You can't kill him. Many people were so angry that their eyes were about to pop out. They were filled with grief and indignation. That Princess Gu of Daiyu State was nothing. She actually wanted to kill him without even interrogating him. However, they were still ordinary people. When they saw the blood on the stage, who would dare to step forward? They all cursed Gong Yimo thousands of times in their hearts. Their eyes were red. More than 100 people died in an instant. The stage was covered in blood. Many people couldn't bear it and turned their heads away. Some of them gritted their teeth and looked at the scene angrily. However, no one realized why those people were covering their heads and why there wasn't a single scream. At this moment, they only hated Daiyu State and Princess Gu of Daiyu State to the extreme. Buji was the person at the front. When he heard the sound of corpses falling behind him and the smell of blood, his loyalty was destroyed by anger for the first time. He couldn't wait to cut Long Chungting Xuan to pieces. The people accompanying him were all his brothers. They were all very loyal and wouldn't say anything. Why did they have to kill them and shift the blame to others? At the moment of death, he only felt anger. There was no fear. At this moment, a voice filled with anger came from afar. How interesting. They say that shameless people are invincible. Long Chungting Shui, you really opened my eyes. Chapter 339. Gong Yimo's voice made Long Cheng's Ting Shui turn pale with fright. She even stood up. What's going on? Wasn't Gong Yimo not coming? Why did she suddenly change her mind? But very quickly, she calmed down and sat back down. So what if she came now? Everyone here was her people. So what if she had the ability to speak eloquently? None of the people here would listen to her. Furthermore, she still had a backup plan. Gong Yimo rushed over using her qinggong. Seeing that there were already 200 to 300 people dead on the stage, she directly landed on the stage and used her internal energy to push the executioners away, stopping the massacre. Everyone was curious about the warrior who suddenly saved everyone when they heard Long Cheng's Ting Shui shout, "Gugwa Princess, don't go too far. Gugwa Princess. She is the Gugwa Princess." Many people's first impression of her instantly disappeared. Their eyes turned red and they couldn't wait to rush up to the stage. Get out of Lu Yi. People of Daiyu State, get out of Lu Yi. Get out of Lu Yi. Almost everyone, regardless of whether they were men or women, old or young, shouted at Gong Yimo on the stage. No one thought about her motive for appearing here. It seemed that Long Cheng's Ting Shui had stirred up people's hearts thoroughly and ruthlessly. Long Cheng's Ting Shui looked at Gong Yimo with a smug expression. From this angle, she couldn't see Gong Yimo's face from the stage. But as a princess, being insulted like this, she would definitely be embarrassed and lose her rationality in anger, right? Especially when she was wronged and no one listened to her explanation. That kind of feeling must be very painful. Old Lu Yiking and old Wang Fei also thought so. No matter how powerful Gong Yimo was, she was still a girl. In this kind of situation, they wanted to see how she would turn the tide. Seeing that the people were so agitated that they bent down to pick up stones to throw, Gong Yimo opened her mouth. Her voice was filled with internal energy and drowned out everyone. Don't you want to know why these people didn't say anything when they were about to die? When she said this, she instantly grasped the key point. No one could answer, so the scene suddenly became strangely quiet. Long Chengting Shui stood on the stage and couldn't stop her in time. A bearded man raised his machete and slashed towards Gong Yimo, but was easily pushed away by her. She strode forward and tore off the headcloth of a death row prisoner nearby. The commoners were surprised to find that their mouths were gagged. Why did they have to cover his mouth? Were they afraid that he would not be willing to be executed? Many people revealed strange expressions. No, Long Chengting Shui exclaimed softly. Gong Yimo had already torn off the cloth covering that person's mouth and cut off his rope. Once he was free, he lay on the ground and coughed violently. Gong Yimo was very fast. With the hidden blade in her hand, she cut the ropes of several people around her. They quickly got up and tore off the things stuffed in their mouths. Old Lu Yi regretted it for a moment. In order to save time, they had captured people and brought them here. If he had known, he would have cut off their tongues one by one. But now, it looked like they were being forced to take that step. At this time, everyone was confused about what had happened. Didn't the princess of Daiyu State want to kill people? Why did she want to save people? But no matter what, it was good that those people survived. No, it's not that the princess of Daiyu State wants to kill us. A man stood up shakily and shouted to the audience. But before he could finish his words, he was shot to death by an arrow. Gong Yimo didn't even have time to turn around. The moment she turned around, she saw the person lying in a pool of blood. Gong Yimo's eyes instantly looked towards Long Chengting Shui. The person behind her hadn't put away his bow and arrow. After Cangjin died, it seemed that she had found another bodyguard. Seeing Long Chengting Shui kill someone, everyone turned to look at her. Long Chengting Shui glared angrily with a look of hatred. I didn't expect that I would see through it. These people deserve to die. Although they are Lu Ye's people, when I was in Daiyu State, they repeatedly harmed me. On the way back, they even abused me. I originally thought that I did something wrong, but now it seems that there's something else behind it. Otherwise, why would you save them? The people were confused. They didn't expect there to be such an inside story. Bullying the princess's servants? Then they really didn't deserve to die. One had to know that the little princess was going to be married off for Lu Ye's sake. Why would they do this? As she spoke, her unfriendly gaze landed on Gong Yimo again. Could it be that there was an inside story? There was no other way. Between a citizen and an outsider, they would definitely trust a citizen. Without giving Gong Yimo a chance to explain, Long Chengting Shui waved her hand and countless cold arrows shot out from all directions. Long Chengting Shui was already prepared. If she didn't want to ruin her reputation, then she wanted her to die without a burial ground. Long Chengting Shui stepped forward and narrowed her eyes. She pointed at Gong Yimo loftily and said, "Originally, I thought that you and Envoy Buji were exchanging flirtatious glances on the way back. However, as Lu Ye's people, they repeatedly harmed me and almost caused me to not be able to come back. I couldn't help but suspect. That's why I was testing you while dealing with these offending officials. I didn't expect that you would actually take the bait. You, a citizen of Daiyu State, actually came to save Lu Ye's people and still say that you didn't collude?" The people were confused. Wasn't it said that the princess of Daiyu State wanted to kill people? How did it become that they were guilty and the little princess wanted to kill them? Moreover, it had escalated to the level of scheming. She even used these guilty officials to test the princess of Daiyu State? That's right. If they didn't collude, why would an outsider like her get involved in Lu Ye's death? Could it be that there really was an affair? Many people looked at Gong Yimo with disdain when they thought of Buji's tall and sturdy figure despite his age. Gong Yimo was furious. However, when she saw that the people below were biased, Gong Yimo knew that without any evidence, they would definitely believe the princess of their own country. No, she had to think of a way. Seeing that Gong Yimo didn't say anything, Long Chengting Shui learned her lesson and didn't give her a chance to refute. She wanted her to be unable to speak. A cold light flashed in her eyes. With a wave of her hand, thousands of arrows were released. Go to hell. Die in infamy. Die in Lu Ye's hands with endless humiliation. Gong Yimo didn't expect her to be so vicious. At this moment, dozens of people suddenly jumped onto the stage. Sikong and the others had rushed over. At the same time, Lu Ye's people were also shooting arrows. Sikong and the others protected Gong Yimo firmly, but the others weren't so lucky. Many of Lu Ye's people on the stage were killed or injured. Even the executioners didn't manage to escape. The smell of blood became thick. Long Chengting Shui's eyes were red from the killing. She didn't let the archers stop. Today, she had to kill Gong Yimo. Chapter 340. Many people screamed and ran away. Those who stayed behind were the more courageous men. But what was going on here? They still hadn't figured out the situation. Why did the little princess want to kill the princess of Daiyu State? It wasn't that they sympathized with the princess of Daiyu State, but they were afraid that they would become enemies with the Daiyu State. More and more corpses were piling up on the stage. If this continued, those who knew the truth would all die. Gong Yimo waved her hand at the nearest archer. Taking advantage of his injury, she grabbed the bow in his hand and pulled it back. Then, when she pulled the bow back, there was a lit fuse hanging on the arrowhead. She aimed at the defense line on the stage. Although she didn't know what it was, Long Chengting Shui, who had been staring at Gong Yimo, felt the danger. She quickly pulled her parents to dodge. As soon as they dodged, Gong Yimo's arrow landed on the seat in the middle of the stage. Immediately, the entire stone seat was blown to pieces. This loud explosion made everyone stop. Only Gong Yimo raised her bow again and pointed it at Long Chengting Shui. Everyone, stop. If anyone moves again, I'll kill her. In the chaos, no one noticed Gong Yimo's move just now. They only felt that her martial arts were unfathomable. She could even smash a stone seat that was as tall as a person. So, at this moment, when they heard her threat, no one dared to move. Everyone was stunned. Before Long Chengting Shui could react to the death threat, Gong Yimo said to everyone present, "Eagle deity above, Gong Yimo of Daiyu State has been wronged. She wants to start a life and death match." Everyone was shocked and revealed a strange expression. What was a life and death match? Everyone in Luyi knew. If the accused felt that he was wronged, then before he died, he could ask for a life and death match. Once the match started, the accused would have to be blindfolded, and the accuser would send out one person to fight. No weapons, hidden weapons, or anything like that. It was pure hand-to-hand combat. He didn't need to hurt anyone. He just needed to defeat them. If the controlling party won in the end, he would have the right to defend himself. Actually, Gong Yimo didn't need to do this. She had Dragon City Everlasting's name tag in her hands. As long as she took it out, these people wouldn't dare to touch her. But she didn't, not because she was soft-hearted, but because she was angry. She wanted to give Long Chengting Shui a very wonderful ending. Whether it was the Eagle God Hall, Eagle God Temple, or the Eagle God Platform, as long as there was an image of the Eagle God, one had to obey the laws of the Eagle God. Otherwise, it would be disrespecting Lu Ye's God. Therefore, even if King Lu Yi was here, he could not refuse. Therefore, Long Chengting Shui had no way to refute Gong Yimo's request. At this moment, she was still immersed in Gong Yimo's attack. That, could that be the legendary weapon on Gong Yimo? No wonder the Emperor of Daiyu State wanted it. Even a woman like her was tempted after seeing the power of the weapon. The commoners were even more confused. Could it be that the Princess of Daiyu State wanted to start a life and death battle on the Divine Eagle platform that was full of corpses? Sikong still didn't agree. Although this law couldn't be violated, they didn't believe in Long Chengting Shue's character. They felt that she wouldn't be honest. However, Gong Yimo smiled. She didn't look like she was being forced to do this. Instead, she looked a little fierce. Drag the living people away. I have my reasons for doing this. Yes. Sikong subconsciously accepted the order and led his men to drag away Lu Ye's men who were still alive. Then, Gong Yimo threw away her bow and sneered at the other party. Please, Long Chengting Shui, since I am in Lu Yi, I will use your Lu Ye's method to prove my innocence. Long Chengting Shui looked at Gong Yimo with a complicated expression. At this moment, she didn't know if she wanted her dead or not. At this moment, Gong Yimo had already covered her eyes and curled her finger at Long Chengting Shui. Forget it. No matter what weapon it is, killing her now is the right thing to do. Otherwise, as long as she is alive, there will be variables. Thinking of this, Long Chengting Shui suppressed her regret and sent the most powerful person in her team forward. This person was newly assigned to her by her father. His name was Yuan Jie, and it was said that his ability wasn't below the hidden sword. Furthermore, Gong Yimo was covering her eyes. If he couldn't take her down, then this person didn't have the right to stay by her side. Kill her, no matter what method you use. Long Chengting Shui ordered when Yuan Jie passed by her. Yuan Jie was stunned for a moment, then went up the platform. At this moment, the living person on the platform had already been dragged to the side by Gong Yimo's men. The ground was littered with corpses. Stepping on the puddles of blood was sticky, and the smell of blood couldn't be dispersed. The citizens who were left behind were all tense. They had just experienced a massacre and were already frightened. Now that a life and death situation was about to happen, they were a little numb. They even had the feeling of wanting to see blood and flesh splattering everywhere. When Gong Yimo heard the voice, she knew that it was from the person beside Long Chengting Shui. Close combat. She hadn't experienced this kind of feeling in a long time. The expressions of the citizens below became complicated. Was this Daiyu State's princess trying to prove that she had been wronged? But could her petite body withstand a man's iron fist? They were suddenly curious about who the Condor would side with. They wanted to know who was at fault for today's farce. The battle was about to start. Without any fancy words or holding back, Gong Yimo suddenly stepped forward and directly punched the opponent to the ground. The whole process didn't take more than a second. This kind of stimulation was even more intense than the massacre of thousands of arrows. Yuan Jie spat out a mouthful of blood. This blow had directly shattered all of his confidence. Feeling the cold eyes of Long Cheng and Ting Shui on the high platform, he trembled and struggled to get up. Once again, he rushed towards Gong Yimo. This kind of unyielding spirit gained the recognition and respect of many people. However, Gong Yimo, because of her cultivation technique, could see every movement around her clearly. She also clearly knew that he was hiding something in his hands when he rushed over. Hence, she stepped forward and grabbed his hand that was about to attack her with one hand. With the other hand, she viciously smashed him towards the condor's statue. She was really too ruthless. She directly knocked Yuan Jie's head on the statue's feathers, causing blood to flow out. Clearly, she only needed to beat him to the ground. Was she trying to kill him? Just as the citizens were suddenly enraged, Gong Yimo used one hand to forcefully press Yuan Jie's head against the statue's feathers. With the other hand, she twisted his hand in a strange position. He cried out in pain. His fingers opened weakly, and the cold weapon fell to the ground. Everyone present was speechless. Yuan Jie actually broke the rules? This was like poking a hornet's nest. This person actually broke the rules in a life and death situation. He didn't deserve to be Lu Ye's soldier. Chapter 341. Gong Yimo pulled down the cover in front of her eyes and smiled. Then can I explain myself now? Her smile did not fit in with this scene of slaughter, but everyone below was mesmerized by her smile. There was no trace of killing intent, but her subordinates were already on the verge of death. She casually tossed aside Yuan Jie, whose head was bleeding profusely. Soon, someone came to drag him away. Gong Yimo looked at Ting Shui with a smile on her face. She couldn't hold back her anger any longer. However, she had underestimated Long Chengting Shui's shamelessness. She said without thinking as she watched Yuan Jie being dragged away. Yuan Jie violated the rules, so this match is invalid. We should start another one. At this moment, the official who had just crawled out from under the table was frightened by Long Chengting Shui's gaze and hurriedly said, Yes, it doesn't count. We need another match. Long Chengting Shui had thought it through. As long as Gong Yimo covered her eyes again, she would get someone to poison her. Then, she would shoot her to death with 10,000 arrows. She did not believe that she would be able to leave the Divine Eagle stage alive after being poisoned. As for weapons, Gong Yimo only had 2 pieces of clothing on her, so it was impossible for her to have more. The commoners all felt that the little princess's actions were despicable. However, Gong Yimo did not care. She could heavily injure another person before dealing with Long Chengting Shui. There was no delay. At this moment, a voice suddenly spoke. Let me. Sikong stood behind Buji and nodded towards Gong Yimo. Gong Yimo was slightly startled. Looking at the ambassador who still had an arrow stuck in his body, she frowned slightly. Buji had already walked to the center of the stage and said to Long Chengting Shui, Divine Eagle, I, Buji, have suffered a great injustice. I want to start a life and death match. Long Chengting Shui was furious. This person actually did not die just now. She could not give him a chance. Thus, she spoke loudly. You still say that there is no adultery? You are still injured, but you can't wait to fight for a woman from Dayu State. Buji, are you worthy of the trust of your family and royal brother? Bah. He, who had always been loyal, suddenly did something that he would never do in the past. He looked at Long Chengting Shui with hatred and a sinister expression. I only hate that I did not see through your vicious heart earlier. You caused so many of my brothers to die so tragically. Let's not talk nonsense, come? As he spoke, he gestured towards Gong Yimo. Google Princess, I have implicated you. This is Liu Ye's family matters. Gong Yimo didn't expect Boogie to suddenly make a move, which disrupted her plans. However, she was a person who respected brave warriors, so she walked to the side and watched as Ting Shui sent someone down. Of Buji. Of Buji. Come, of. Where is your justice? Have you forgotten what this religion gave you? Jichong did not want to go against Buji. Although Buji was not good at martial arts, he was the first to enter the sect. He was their elder. Plus, they would never doubt Buji's loyalty. Jichong was in a difficult position. On one side was the princess. On the other side was a respected elder. Buji covered the wound on his shoulder and sneered. Looks like, once you are tainted by Long Chengting Shui, you will lose your nature. Buji, how dare you? Old Liu Yi King was anxious. It was all Buji's fault for being nosy. Gong Yimo was not dead yet, but time was of the essence. What if Long Chengting Shui suddenly returned? I'm being impudent? Buji pointed at himself and laughed. He was tall, but he was very dispirited. His face was full of mockery as he slowly said, Dayu State has a saying, if the upper beam is not straight, the lower beam will be crooked. It is talking about people like you. Buji is only glad that the king is not like you. Men, drag this person who slandered the princess and disrespected the king's father away. Let's see who dares. At this time, another minister also came over with injuries. As soon as he came, more than 10 people who could still move walked over and stood behind Boogie. They never thought that Long Chengting Shui would be so ruthless. She faked the king's decree and gathered them together. Then, without a word, she captured them and was about to kill them. And all of this was just to cover up for Long Chengting Shui. She wanted to use their deaths to frame the princess of Daiyu state. If not for Gong Yimo's timely arrival, they would already be dead. But so what if they were alive? So many of their brothers had died. They had died at the hands of their own people. The eagle god is the witness of this life and death battle. Even if you are the king's father, you have no right to stop it. The minister was not injured. At this time, he was full of anger. He glared fiercely at Long Chengting Shui. If you dare to go against the eagle god, the king will demote you to a commoner when he returns. Old Liu Yi King retreated in fear. Seeing him so useless, Long Chengting Shui angrily said to Ji Chong, "What are you waiting for? Defeat them." Ji Chong looked at the dozens of injured people in front of him and then looked at himself who was unharmed. Finally, he gritted his teeth and knelt down on one knee. Eagle God above, Ji Chong has lost this round. He could go against his conscience to help the little princess kill people, but he could not do it to Buji who was still alive. You. Long Chengting Shui was angry and pushed out another person. Kill him. Kill them all. And that person happened to be from the same sect as Buji. How to put it, Songjian and Songxiu were the best in martial arts in the sect. But there were many people in the sect. Some were officials, some were businessmen. But this kind of camaraderie would not disappear. Princess, your subordinate is useless. He really could not do anything to a group of disabled people. Trash. Long Chengting Shui was so angry that she almost lost her mind. In this kind of dilemma, her body was filled with hostility. She pulled out a guard's scimitar and stabbed the person who was unwilling to fight to death on the spot. The commoners were stunned. Was this still their gentle and amiable little princess? Buji laughed loudly. Since I won, then can I plead my case? He looked at Long Chengting Shui with tears in his eyes. Not only do I want to plead my case, I also want to accuse. I want to accuse that woman of her evil deeds. He pointed at Long Chengting Shui, but Long Chengting Shui narrowed her eyes. Buji, you don't care about the lives of your Al family? She actually dared to threaten him in this kind of situation. I believe the king will protect them. Buji did not seem to be threatened by her and said loudly, Eagle God above. Liu Ye's people. I want to plead my case. I did not collude with Daiyu State. I also did not frame this woman. The reason why Daiyu State did not want her was because during an important ceremony in Daiyu State, she slandered the princess of Gu State. The emperor of Daiyu State was furious and sent her back to her country. Chapter 342. Impudent. Shut up. Long Chengting Shui couldn't hold it in anymore. She ignored her parents and ran down. She wanted to kill Boogie with her own hands. He was injured, so what was she afraid of? Seeing Long Chengting Shui running over, Boogie wasn't afraid at all. He continued, Do you want to know why she was in such a hurry to kill 1,000 of us, Boogie? The old king of Liu Yi was furious. Don't slander us. Think about your family. Do you want your family to be discredited? Dying with infamy is discrediting the family. Boogie coughed a few times and said loudly before Long Chengting Shui rushed onto the stage. The reason why Long Chengting Shui wants to kill us as soon as possible and frame the princess of Daiyu State is because on the way here, she ran away and fell into the hands of Chakran who wanted to stir up trouble. She was also violated by Chakran. Bastard! Long Chengting Shui rushed forward and left a deep nail mark on Boogie's face. Then she said to the crowd in a panic, It's not like that. There's no such thing. This is all his slander. However, the commoners were already stunned. This farce had taken a turn that was simply too terrifying. Thinking of the Duke's mansion that was sealed yesterday, the uncle and the niece, seeing that no one answered her, she stood on the stage and looked around. Finally, she angrily scolded Boogie. You traitor! Coward! Then why don't you tell me how you saw Gong Yimo whip me? If the whip mark hadn't healed, Long Chengting Shui would have ripped off her clothes to show everyone. She originally thought that if these people died, Gong Yimo wouldn't be able to defend herself. She didn't expect that in the end, Liu Ye's people would bite her back. Ha ha ha. So you finally admit it? Boogie couldn't help but laugh. You. Long Chengting Shue's eyes flashed with killing intent. She suddenly reached out and pulled the arrow out of Boogie's body. In an instant, blood flowed out. What are you doing? The person who was originally supporting Boogie suddenly became angry. Long Chengting Snow waved her hand, and all the archers once again raised their arrows. Gong Yimo's expression slightly tightened. She did not expect Long Chengting Snow to be so reckless. After being exposed, she still wanted to kill? Seeing that Long Chengting Shui wanted to kill him to silence him, Boogie laughed loudly. If you don't want people to know, don't do it in the first place. My family does not have a coward. None of the brothers here are afraid of death. Long Chengting Snow angrily tried to stab Boogie's heart with an arrow, but was caught by Boogie. In the end, he was someone who practiced martial arts. Even if he was injured, he was not someone Long Chengting Snow could deal with. He looked at Long Chengting Shui, the hatred in his eyes rolling, almost dripping blood. With just a glance, Long Chengting Shui panicked and hurriedly retreated as if she had seen a ghost. He grabbed Long Chengting Snow's arrow, but in the end, he didn't dare to stab it back, even though he really wanted to personally avenge his brothers. But the bottom line in his heart made him unable to do it. Boogie made the people behind him retreat and did not look at Long Chengting Shui again. He walked step by step to the side of the eagle god statue and actually knelt down with a plop. His face was filled with grief and indignation, pain and blood. In the end, tears fell. Heavens above, the eagle god is wise. I, Al-Boogie, have been loyal my whole life, have not let down my family, have not let down my king. But now, because of a moment of carelessness, countless brothers have died tragically. I, Al-Boogie, am willing to die, to appease the anger of my brothers who died unjustly, to prove the innocence of the 1,000 people here. After saying that, he actually directly stabbed the arrow into his own chest. My lord. Boogie, whose indignant voice is that in his ear. He could no longer hear clearly. His eyes were blurry, and he seemed to see the eagle god soaring. Poor me, Boogie. I have been loyal my whole life, but I was actually slandered to death by a woman. How unfair the heavens are. His corpse crashed to the ground. When he died, the dozen people who survived cried bitterly. In just a moment, many people also committed suicide. Before they died, their resentful eyes fell on Long Chengting Shui. This person, in order to cover up her ugliness, she actually wanted so many people to pay for her. She is the most hateful person. Long Chengting Shui was already scared silly by the scene in front of her eyes. It seems that ever since Gong Yimo started the life and death situation, things have been going out of control. No, it can still be controlled. Just kill them all. Thinking of this, she continuously retreated and then screamed, "Release the arrows! Release the arrows! Don't stop until they are dead." She did not believe that Gong Yimo still had weapons on her. She wanted to kill Gong Yimo. It would be good if she died. At this moment, there were countless corpses between the Imperial Guards and Gong Yimo. At that moment, Gong Yimo was deep in a pool of blood, facing the arrows from all directions alone. All of you stop for this king. Suddenly, a stern shout with heavy killing intent came from all directions. Just by hearing the voice, Gong Yimo could imagine how angry Long Chengting Wuji was. Old Lu Yi and old Wang Fei's face suddenly turned pale. Didn't Long Chengting Wuji go to Baiji's house? Why did he come back so quickly? He should be able to complete a round trip at night. But now was not the time to care about that. Instead, it was how they were going to endure Long Chengting Wuji's anger. Long Chengting Wuji was really mad, especially after seeing the countless people dying on the field. He was so angry that his liver hurt. Those were all his, Lu Ye's, people. Long Chengting Shui hid behind her parents the moment Long Chengting Wuji appeared. Old Lu Yi and old Wang Fei also came down from the high platform, trembling in fear as they faced their son. He came from afar, bringing with him a mountain-like aura, making these people almost kneel down. The commoners had already kneeled down. Although Long Chengting Wuji had only ascended the throne for 2 years, he had worked hard and won the hearts of the people. The cold and sticky blood on the ground stained his leather boots. With every step Long Chengting Wuji took, he wished he could strangle his own parents and sister. His eagle-like eyes looked deeply at the 3 people in front of him, and he said softly, "This king gave you a private army to protect your safety, not for you to kill loyal people, and not for you to help the evildoers." Wuji, shut up. Long Chengting Wuji directly interrupted his mother's words. He was extremely disappointed with this mother who only knew how to pamper Long Chengting Shui and did not care about the consequences. Wuji, she is your mother. Old Lu Yi could not hold it in anymore. Wasn't it just killing a few people? For his sister's reputation, why couldn't he kill them? Even if it was the leaders of other tribes, they would do the same when they encountered such a situation. Long Chengting Wuji ignored him. His gloomy eyes fell on Long Chengting Shui, causing her to tremble. Long Chengting Shui. Royal brother. She cowered as she looked at Long Chengting Wuji. That appearance, where was the ferocious look from before? The commoners gasped in amazement, but their hearts gradually formed their own judgment. In this farce, it was clear who was right and who was wrong. Chapter 343. You still have the cheek to call me. Longqing Wuji was so angry that he laughed. He pointed at the corpses on the ground, his fingers trembling. I just said I was leaving, and you instigated my father to use his private army to kill people for you? Longqing Ting Shui, you're really something. I didn't. She looked at the old Lu Yi pleadingly. The old Lu Yi immediately blocked her. This has nothing to do with Ting Shui. This was my idea. He glanced at the people below and said loudly, "It's not enough that these wicked servants persecuted Ting Shui. Now they want to play the blame game. Wuji, you must uphold justice for Ting Shui. Otherwise, her reputation will be ruined." The old Lu Yi was still trying to confuse the public and push the blame to others. Wuji, there's really something wrong with these people. You didn't hear Buji slandering Ting Shui just now. He clearly has evil intentions. The old consort helped at the right time. Speaking of Buji, Longqing Wuji's heart ached. That was an official he trusted very much, but he was killed just like that. At this moment, Longqing Ting Shui shed tears and begged, "Brother, it's all Ting Shui's fault. Brother, please don't blame my father and mother. It's all my fault." At this moment, the old consort also begged, "Wuji, we did it for your sister's reputation." She lowered her voice and said, "Now, he's dead. If you don't let your sister off and make her lose her reputation, won't she lose everything?" Longqing Wuji's sharp eyes suddenly glared over, causing the old consort to be speechless. "It's because of your indulgence that she became so lawless." The old Lu Yi and the old consort didn't speak anymore. They knew in their hearts that since the person was dead, even if Longqing Wuji was angry at them, he wouldn't lose everything. This was really a double loss. As for what punishment he would give, they were his biological parents. What was there to be afraid of? Longqing Wuji felt like his entire head was exploding. Below, there was a group of commoners who wanted to know the truth. On the stage, there was also Gong Yimo and her people, as well as the few people who were still alive. Those people were looking at him expectantly, hoping that he would uphold justice. At this time, all he had to do was say that everything was his sister's fault and that everything Boogie said was true. Then, Ting Shui's reputation in Dragon City would fall to the bottom, and no one would dare to marry such a vicious person. If he said that what Boogie said wasn't true, then those who were still alive would definitely be disappointed and lose the courage to continue living. And Gong Yimo, at this moment, he glanced at Gong Yimo. She was standing not far away, deep in thought. Ting Shui, apologize to Princess Gu. Longqing Wuji gritted his teeth. No matter what the truth is, you shouldn't implicate the innocent Princess Gu. She's Lu Ye's VIP guest. This sentence established Gong Yimo's weight. However, Ting Shui felt that as long as she apologized, even if Longqing Wuji stood on her side in the end, the commoners wouldn't believe her. After all, if she apologized, it meant that she had wronged Gong Yimo. Since she wronged Gong Yimo, why couldn't she slander Boogie? So she couldn't apologize. She couldn't apologize. Therefore, she pointed at the shattered stone chair on the stage and said with some fear, I don't dare to go near her. She has a sharp weapon on her. She'll smash me to pieces. Many commoners didn't know what she meant, but Longqing Wuji knew. Gong Yimo had a sharp weapon on her that could smash people to pieces. She even used a sharp weapon to hurt people just now. Gong Yimo took a few steps forward and smiled. You see, I'm only wearing a few clothes, and I've already used my only self-defense weapon, but you don't look like you're sincere about apologizing. Longqing Wuji glanced at Gong Yimo and found that she didn't look like she could hide anything. He was slightly relieved because she would definitely carry something so important with her all the time. Tingxue, why aren't you apologizing? Longqing Tingxue was forced to apologize with gritted teeth. I'm sorry. Gong Yimo was amused. She hated Longqing Tingxue to the extreme, so she definitely wouldn't let her off easily. Sorry for what? Longqing Tingxue raised her head and glared at her angrily. At this moment, she felt that her brother was still on her side and didn't intend to sacrifice himself for those 1,000 people. Therefore, her courage came back and she still hated Gong Yimo to the bone. I shouldn't misunderstand you. Longqing Wuji's expression became slightly better. Gong Yimo shook her head in her heart. Longqing Wuji was a good person, but because he didn't have any relatives when he was young, he didn't care about these so-called relatives when he grew up. Especially this sister, he had always been the one to take care of her when she was young. He was strict with his words, but he didn't teach her a lesson. In the end, he was the one who suffered. However, she wouldn't let these people go. Therefore, she calmly approached and asked aggressively, What did you misunderstand about me? Did you misunderstand that I had an affair with Boogie, or that I almost caused your death? Gong Yimo sneered when she saw Longqing Tingxue backing away in fear. So you wanted to kill people, but you said it was to force me to show up. So you kept saying that I had an affair with Boogie. Let me tell you, this isn't a misunderstanding. This is framing. It's intentional framing. Princess Gu. Longqing Wuji frowned. He was already annoyed enough. He didn't know how to clear the name of the dead, and he had to appease the living. As for Longqing Tingxue, he would punish her severely, but he couldn't bear to destroy her. Therefore, he said unyieldingly, we'll talk about this when we get back to the palace. After all, it was a private matter. Even if he wanted to punish Longqing Tingxue, he couldn't do it in front of everyone. After all, embarrassing Longqing Tingxue would also bring shame to the royal family. Gong Yimo looked at him disapprovingly. She believed that Longqing Wuji would punish Longqing Tingxue severely, but that wasn't enough. It wasn't enough to atone for her sins. Moreover, Longqing Wuji was biased. Just like now, between the few people left and Longqing Tingxue, he was so angry, but in the end, he still chose to protect Longqing Tingxue's reputation first. Of course, there was a reason to protect the royal family's reputation, but she was still angry. Although I'm very grateful that you chose to believe me without hesitation, I don't agree with the way you handled this matter. Gong Yimo's words made Longqing Wuji's face darken. Now that his thoughts were in a mess, couldn't they talk about it when they got back? Longqing Tingxue saw that they seemed to be in conflict, so she hurriedly said to Gong Yimo pitifully, I'm sorry. It's all my fault. Please don't blame royal brother. It's all my fault for misunderstanding you. I'm sorry. Gong Yimo frowned in disgust. All right, can you stop talking? Your apology makes me feel disgusted. I don't accept it. Longqing Wuji was anxious and anxious. His pair of blue and purple eyes, at this moment, had a kind of deep black color. Then what do you want to do? His voice was gloomy, and there was a danger of a storm coming. Chapter 344. Couldn't they just go back to the palace to resolve it? Why did they have to do it in front of everyone? Wasn't this forcing Liu Ye's royal family to lose face? Gong Yimo knew his concerns, but she was even more dissatisfied with his actions. Perhaps Longqing Wuji would severely punish Long Chengting Shui, but they all knew that no matter what the punishment was, as long as Long Chengting Shui stepped into Liu Ye's palace, she would be spared. She would be spared from the death penalty and her reputation would be preserved. She could even marry in a grand manner in the future, and it wouldn't affect her. Then no matter how harsh the punishment was, it would be useless. At least, Gong Yimo felt that they couldn't let her off so easily. Even if this was Liu Yi, the people below the stage were all Liu Ye's citizens, and she was up against Liu Ye's royal family. I don't want to do anything, Gong Yimo said in a deep voice, but her finger pointed at Long Chengting Shui. But I feel that if she wants to apologize, she should at least kneel down. Princess Gu, don't go too far. The old princess consort who could be considered pretty glared angrily. She felt that Gong Yimo really didn't know what was good for her. In Liu Yi, they were magnanimous and let her live. It was fine if she didn't know how to be grateful, but she actually wanted a yard after being given an inch. Not only her, even the old king Liu Yi was very angry. But the strange thing was that when the citizens below saw Gong Yimo bully their princess, they strangely didn't say anything. The angry old king Liu Yi didn't notice this, but Longqing Wuji did. The fact that the citizens didn't say anything proved that they also felt that Long Chengting Shui had gone overboard with Gong Yimo and she should apologize. So even if he was powerless, he still made a decision in an instant. Ting Shui, kneel down. Long Chengting Shui thought that she was hearing things. Her brother actually wanted her to kneel down to a woman from Daiyu State, and this woman even harmed her like this. Longqing Wuji looked at her with fire in his eyes. Don't force this king to say it again. Even if he wanted to protect her reputation, he could only do his best to cover her up. But if she didn't cooperate, did she expect him to be biased to the point of silencing others? Seeing that Dongqing Wuji was really angry, Dong Chengting Shui was still afraid in her heart, but to kneel to Gong Yimo, she was really unwilling. She was more than willing to stab Gong Yimo in the back. She also didn't understand why Longqing Wuji changed his mind because of Gong Yimo's words. Could it be that Gong Yimo had seduced her brother so quickly? Seeing that Long Chengting Shui was unwilling, the old Liu Yi king pulled on Long Chengting Shui's arm and said angrily, "Why are you kneeling? You are a princess, and you did nothing wrong. Why should he kneel to someone from Daiyu State?" As he spoke, he gloomily looked at Gong Yimo. Gong Yimo smiled and looked at Dongqing Wuji. She knew that Dongqing Wuji would definitely agree to her request, even if he was biased. Sure enough, when Long Chengting Shui was pulled away by the old Liu Yi king, she saw a faint light flash in her brother's eyes. Her heart thumped, and she quickly shook off her father's hand and cried, I'll kneel, I'll kneel." The faint light in Dongqing Wuji's eyes gradually faded. He couldn't help but look at Dongcheng Shui. It was this insight and understanding of the situation that made him dote on her for so long. But today, he was really disappointed. "Kneel." He lifted his thin lips and said coldly. Dongcheng Shui immediately knelt down with a heart full of hatred and killing intent. There was blood and corpses everywhere on the stage. She knelt among them and wanted to vomit. "Ting Shui." The old Liu Yi king and old Wang Fei shouted in unison, full of heartache. At this moment, the old Liu Yi king wanted to rush up and teach Gong Yimo a lesson, but he was firmly held back by old Wang Fei. Didn't she see that her son was angry? Seeing that no one could help her, Dongcheng Shui looked at Gong Yimo and reflected in her heart. How could she lose? Gong Yimo clearly said that she wouldn't come, but she still came. Not only did she come, she even used a weapon to stop the fierce arrows. If only she didn't stop at that time, she would have been scared silly. But if she didn't stop at that time, they would all be shot to death. How could there be such an unbearable scene now? So, with deep regret and hatred, she kowtowed to Gong Yimo and gritted her teeth. "I'm sorry, Princess Gugua." Gong Yimo crossed her arms and smiled. "Do you regret what you did?" Her voice was so mocking. Regret? Dongqing Ting Shui stared straight at Gong Yimo. She regretted that she missed a good opportunity just now and didn't kill you directly. Gong Yimo seemed to be very satisfied and nodded. Okay, but I didn't make it clear just now. I personally won't accept your apology because I find it dirty. I want you to kneel to the corpses on the ground and the few Luyi people over there who escaped death. You should apologize to them and kowtow 3 times. Gong Yimo. This time, it was Dongcheng Wuji's voice that was filled with anger. She was actually so aggressive in front of Luyi. There were so many people present, but it was very quiet. Gong Yimo's voice was clearly transmitted to everyone's ears, echoing faintly between heaven and earth with a trace of coercion. Dongcheng Ting Shui looked at Dongcheng Wuji with a panicked expression. It was still acceptable for her to kowtow to Gong Yimo because she had wronged her. However, if she kowtowed to the dead people, wouldn't she be admitting what Buji said and that she killed them to silence them? Then what reputation would she have left? Old Lu Ye's eyes were burning with anger. Princess of Dayu State, do you think Lu Yi is Dayu State? Is it a place where you can behave atrociously? You don't have the right to interfere in Lu Ye's matters. He wasn't wrong. In fact, Gong Yimo didn't want to interfere in this matter. After all, it wasn't reasonable for her to interfere in how Lu Yi died. However, when she thought of Buji's death to show his sincerity and his last sentence, heaven is so unfair. It struck her deeply in her heart. She didn't want to meddle in other people's business, but she couldn't suppress the anger in her heart. Heaven is so unfair. This was also a thorn in her heart that had always been in her heart in her previous life. She clearly didn't do anything wrong, but she forcefully made a mistake. She clearly tried her best to quell the chaos, but in the end, her reputation was ruined. Heaven is so unfair. What about you? Do you think so too? Gong Yimo looked at Dongcheng Wuji, and Dongcheng Wuji looked back at her solemnly. He believed that Gong Yimo was not only seeking justice for herself, but also challenging his dignity as a king. And it was on Lu Ye's land, in front of Lu Ye's citizens. There was quite a commotion below the stage. The citizens were all in a mess, their hearts in a mess. They didn't know what kind of ending they were hoping for. However, many people's eyes swept across the corpse on the stage with pity in their eyes. What if this king doesn't agree? Dongcheng Wuji's voice seemed to be squeezed out from between his teeth. Furthermore, the pressure on his body increased as killing intent flashed in his eyes. Chapter 345. Long Cheng, Ting Shui, and the rest were relieved. They even hoped that Gong Yimo would continue. She had angered Longcheng Wuji. They wanted to see how Gong Yimo would leave Lu Yi alive. Everyone felt the pressure, as well as the tension in the air. At this moment, Gong Yimo closed her eyes and pointed to the blood-stained eagle statue. Do you know why Lu Ye's founding king had an eagle as his symbol? Longcheng Wuji was stunned. He did not know why she suddenly said this. Gong Yimo continued. Do you know why the founding king Ming heir Tianhan did not proclaim himself emperor after establishing his country? As she spoke, her heavy gaze swept across the audience. Everyone became quiet again. Her gaze carried a trace of desire and inquiry. The eagle was the founding king's favorite animal. There were eagle statues everywhere in Lu Yi, but no one knew the reason. The eagle was used as a symbol because the eagle would not be biased. Every child it gave birth to would be thrown off a cliff by their mother not long after they were born. Those who could fly would live, those who could not fly would die. Lu Ye's environment was harsh. Survival of the fittest. So Ming heir Tianhan used the eagle as a symbol. He hoped that every citizen of Lu Yi would be as tenacious as a young eagle. Those who survived would be strong. He also hoped that the person who became the king of Lu Yi would be as fair as an eagle and would not be biased towards any of his children. Gong Yimo's words were like a thorn that pierced deeply into Longcheng Wuji's heart. At this moment, his face was burning. He actually felt ashamed and unable to show his face. He thought that he was fair, but he could not refute Gong Yimo's blatant rebuke. Gong Yimo continued. The reason why Ming heir Tian Han did not proclaim himself emperor was not because he could not, but because he wanted to warn the world that most of Lu Ye's citizens were good. However, there was still class and injustice. So he had been waiting for an eagle-like overlord to solve this matter. He wanted to turn Lu Yi into a truly free and fair country. That would be the time to proclaim himself emperor. Gong Yimo pursed her lips and looked at Long Chengwuji. I always thought that you would be that person, but you have disappointed me. Look at them. Gong Yimo pointed at the corpses on the ground. Actually, to a person in power, as long as there was a valid reason, 1,000 people dying was not a big deal. However, the accumulation of blood was still very scary. Dark red. Many people's heads were covered with cloth. They did not even let out a scream when they died. Chengwuji, look at them. Gong Yimo pointed at the remaining 7 people. At this moment, they were firmly gathered together. Their eyes were full of reverence. Not everyone had Gong Yimo's courage. No matter what environment they were born in, it was hard to overturn their beliefs. They were afraid of death, but they were even more afraid of the king's anger. Long Chengwuji could not help but look at them. They were all injured. They were not old and were in a sorry state. Only a pair of eyes were looking at him nervously and sincerely. They all believed that he would give them an explanation. Gong Yimo smiled. Look at your citizens below the stage. She sighed. Indeed, I was meddling in other people's business today. I offended the Lu Yi royal family's face, and I apologize. However, I gave myself the face, so Long Chengwuji should apologize even more. She can live, but since she dared to do it, she should dare to bear the consequences. It is a fact that she killed 1,000 innocent people to silence them. If you think that she did not deserve to die, she should at least kneel down and apologize. It's only 3 kowtows. These people have kowtowed countless times at her feet when they were alive. Everyone was silent. In the end, she asked softly, It's not too much, right? She asked Long Chengwuji in a very, very soft voice. At this moment, Long Chengwuji looked at her with a very complicated gaze, as if he did not know this girl. She originally did not need to get involved in this mess, but she did. Even if she was in Lu Ye's territory, she was still aggressive and did whatever she wanted to do. Long Chengwuji's gaze fell on Long Chengwuji. It seemed that this sister of his had been destroyed by herself. Indeed, her plan was very good. However, it was a pity that she met Gong Yimo, who would not take a beating passively. She only had herself to blame. Ting Shui, kowtow. At this moment, his muddled mind finally cleared up. Although he was angry at Gong Yimo's aggressiveness, he was also glad. Preserving his life was the only thing he could do. However, was it really necessary to preserve this last fig leaf? No matter how simple his people were, they were not fools. Long Cheng's family was not without opponents. If this kind of weakness was left behind, it would become a knife for his enemies to kill him. Therefore, he could not be soft-hearted. This was actually the reason why Gong Yimo dared to do this. If she hid it, it would be a hidden danger. There was no need to cause chaos because of Long Ting Shui. She believed that Long Chengwuji, who had calmed down, would understand. As if sensing something, the two looked at each other. They both realized that they were thinking of the same thing. However, Long Chengwuji's eyes still contained anger, while Gong Yimo was still very calm. Long Ting Shui was stunned. She did not speak for a long time. She did not expect that because of Gong Yimo's words, her brother did not plan to protect her anymore. She could feel the angry eyes of the people below the stage. Because of Long Chengwuji's words, they had completely believed what Buji said. As for her, a woman who killed people and wanted to play with people's hearts, she was afraid that from now on, she would no longer have any good reputation. No. She looked pleadingly at the old Lu Yi king, making a final struggle. The old Lu Yi king was angry and in a difficult position. He looked at Long Chengwuji and said sorrowfully, Wuji, she is your sister. If you don't kowtow, this king will no longer have a sister. Long Chung Wuji's words directly cut off all her paths of retreat. If she was not a princess, her ending would be very, very miserable. Therefore, under Long Chung Wuji's cold gaze, she finally kowtowed for the first time. Her forehead was stained with the blood on the ground. In her heart, she had already torn Gong Yimo into pieces. What a good plan. As long as she did not destroy it, she could wash away all the dirt on her body and become Lu Ye's most popular princess again. Then, she could get married grandly. However, all of this was ruined by Gong Yimo. She was simply a jinx. When she kowtowed, the people below were in an uproar. Their expressions were angry, but because Long Chung Wuji was still there, they endured it. No wonder the little princess was so anxious to kill someone. Fortunately, this princess from Dayu State had ruined it. Otherwise, they would not have known that the little princess was such a person. She was simply Lu Ye's disgrace. If it wasn't for the fact that Longqing Wuji was still here, those upright people would have shouted, Longqing Ting Shui, get out of Lu Yi. Under such humiliating gazes, Long Chung Ting Shui kowtowed for the second time. All of this was Gong Yimo's fault. Chapter 346. And Longqing Wuji. He actually didn't help his own sister. In the end, she even hated the old king Lu Yi and the old Wang Fei. If they weren't useless, how could she be so passive? All of this was someone else's fault. When she was about to kowtow for the third time, the people actually dispersed. This made Longqing Ting Shui stunned. Gong Yimo laughed. Lu Ye's people also didn't accept her apology. This was really fun. Humiliation. When Longqing Ting Shui reacted, she realized that she was actually hated by the people of her own country. Her hands clenched into fists and made cracking sounds. She couldn't bring herself to kowtow for the third time. But if she didn't move, Longqing Wuji also didn't move. Since it had already reached this point, then she should finish kowtowing. After such a long silence, Longqing Ting Shui gritted her teeth and kowtowed for the third time. There was no one under the stage anymore. There was only humiliation, endless humiliation. At this time, there was a sudden commotion. The few people who were still alive, after seeing her kowtow, actually committed suicide. But their faces were filled with satisfaction, willing to die. The last person knelt in front of the somewhat panicked Longqing Wuji. His body was covered with trembling and bleeding wounds, but his eyes were clean and clear. He looked at Longqing Wuji and said, Lu Yi, as a king, will definitely be better. I want to tell this news to Lord Buji. With that, he knelt down and died. And in an instant, all of his resentment seemed to have been pacified. At this moment, an eagle's cry came from the sky. It was very likely that it was raised by one of the dead people. It circled in the sky for a long time before it left. It seemed that the moment it left, the cold yin qi on the field also disappeared. That was because Dragon City Everlasting's final justice had comforted the spirits of the dead warriors. Why did they commit suicide? Someone whispered. And Gong Yimo looked at Longqing Ting Shui, who was kneeling there without saying a word. Because Longqing Ting Shui was still alive. If they died now, it would be more straightforward. She shook her head and prepared to leave. At this time, Old King Lu Ye's guards blocked Gong Yimo's path, and Gong Yimo's imperial guards immediately guarded her. The two sides were at loggerheads, and the old Wang Fei helped Long Chungting swear up with heartache. She glared angrily at Gong Yimo. What are you doing? Longqing Wuji was once again enraged. Can you stop causing trouble? He looked at his father. The old Lu Yi king gritted his teeth. It's this woman who ruined your sister's reputation. Wuji, are you afraid of the Dayu state if you don't kill her? Gong Yimo was not afraid at all. She looked at the people in front of her and stood there calmly. She did not even move her eyebrows. Si Kong and the others were all tensed up. They would never allow these Lu Yi people to harm the princess in the slightest. Enough. Back down. Longqing Wuji ordered. The old Lu Yi king's people quickly backed down and made a path. The old Lu Yi king's face was red with anger. He stood in front of Gong Yimo. I will not allow this person to take a step into the palace, unless she steps over my body. Longqing Wuji was also unyielding. He strode forward and grabbed Gong Yimo's hand. His deep eyes swept over them. Let's see who dares to stop me. This was equivalent to slapping his father's face. At that moment, the expression on his old face was quite interesting. Of course, no one would dare to stop Longqing Wuji. Thus, Gong Yimo was pulled into the royal carriage and headed towards the palace. Sikong and the others saw the princess being pulled away by the old Lu Yi king. Their hearts were in turmoil. Your Highness, the princess has been taken away. After getting into the royal carriage, Longqing Wuji was still holding onto Gong Yimo's hand. Her brows jumped up. You're still not letting go? Longqing Wuji gave an angry laugh. I'm not letting go. You're very aggressive, just like a wild horse on the prairie, but you've angered me today. Gong Yimo gave a cold laugh. I haven't caused trouble for you yet. Your Longqing family really is talented, being able to think of such a sinister method. In my entire life, this is the first time I've met such a shameless person. Once she said this, Longqing Wuji's hand holding her wrist tightened. His eyes were filled with a deep rage. Gong Yimo, don't think that I don't dare to kill you. Gong Yimo was also very strong. I don't remember doing anything to offend you. You. His deep, handsome face came closer. You're trying to challenge my dignity as a king. Gong Yimo rolled her eyes at the sky. If I wanted to attack your dignity, wouldn't it be better to just take out your name tag? Who dares to move against me? Her words made Longqing Wuji stunned, and strangely, his anger disappeared. That's right. Longqing Wuji's name tag represented Longqing Wuji. As long as she took it out from the start, no one would dare to touch her. But if such an important thing fell into the hands of others, others would only think that he was useless as a king. That would be a real loss of dignity. Thinking of this, Longqing Wuji glanced at Gong Yimo's sullen little face and suddenly smiled slightly. Then why didn't you take it out? Rather than a difficult life and death situation, wasn't taking out the name tag the easiest way to solve the problem? At this moment, Gong Yimo's face stiffened. If I have to do it again, I'll take it out. When she said this, the two of them fell silent. Gong Yimo didn't expect Longqing Ting Shui to directly give the order to shoot. In the chaos, it was useless for her to take out the name tag. If she took out the name tag the moment she appeared, those people wouldn't have died today. It was also unclear. Perhaps Longqing Ting Shui would say that the name tag in her hand was fake and still give the order to shoot. Longqing Wuji clearly thought of this point. He reached out his hand and touched Gong Yimo's head. But God knows, he originally wanted to use his fingers to smooth out the wrinkles between her eyebrows. This is my fault. When we reach the palace, I will personally go to the Eagle Deity Temple to ask for forgiveness. Gong Yimo slapped his hand away. What was the use of that? I'm tired. I'm going to sleep. After she said this, she really laid down on the bed in the carriage. She was dug out of bed early in the morning, and then so many things happened. It was really tiring. Seeing her angrily turn her back to him, Longqing Wuji couldn't help but laugh. Fortunately, his carriage was a big bed, otherwise, there really wouldn't be a place for her to sleep. But he was a little worried, so he pushed Gong Yimo's back. Hey, you have to keep your words. You can't forget your promise yesterday just because of Ting Shui's matter. Gong Yimo said angrily with her back facing him. Why don't you marry Longqing Ting Shui to that rotten old man? I'll take you and Lu Yi to become rich? Longqing Wuji didn't know whether to laugh or cry. You? He knew that Gong Yimo said this because she wouldn't ignore the country's affairs for private matters. That was enough. A woman like her who could distinguish the importance of things was really too rare. Longqing Wuji sighed in his heart. If Longqing Ting Shui had half of Gong Yimo's breadth of mind, it wouldn't be like this. Chapter 347. Meanwhile, in the faraway Dayu state, a bloody storm had just subsided. The Long family had been overthrown. With Li Ke's testimony and material evidence, Gong Dai had uprooted them. After all, this was treason. Once they succeeded in killing the little princess, it was likely to cause a war between the two countries. Just this crime alone was enough to make the emperor furious. He directly put Long Xiangxiang under house arrest and handed the Long family over to Gong Dai to deal with. And the result was naturally to eliminate the source of the problem. Gong Dai was walking along the long waterside corridor when he suddenly stopped. Last time, he had poured out his heart to the royal sister here. He wondered how she was doing in Luyi. Now that he had signed an agreement with Yuheng and started to trade, it would not be long before the bank became the lifeline of the country. His power had once again expanded. Now that his people had gone to Yuqi, if he could join forces with Yuqi, then he would be the first person to open up a channel between the three countries. His shops would also be the first to openly enter another country. It has to be said that this was what Gong Yimo had in mind. But this was not what he wanted. The cool wind from the waterside pavilion blew, causing his eyebrows to wrinkle slightly. His long black robe was indescribably lonely. He wanted to be with the royal sister forever. He wanted the royal sister to not have anyone else in her eyes. The country, the people, there was only him. At this time, someone came up behind him. Gong Ju was alert. He turned around and saw Gong Che dressed in white with a fox fur coat draped over his shoulder. At this time, he was looking at the waterside pavilion outside the corridor, slightly lost in thought. After toppling the Long family, the Lu family took advantage of the opportunity to switch sides to the Crown Prince's camp. Only then did Lu Xianfei save herself from the fate of being killed by Gong Ju. Now, Lu Xianfei was afraid of Gong Ju. She was afraid that he would come to avenge his mother's death. It could be said that in the entire Daiyu state, there were only two powers, Gong Dai and Gong Che. Gong Dai had said that he had no intention of becoming the emperor. Logically speaking, there should not be any conflict between the two of them. However, they stood opposite each other, as if they were separated by an abyss of fury, so close yet so far apart. I heard that Imperial brother is getting married. Congratulations. Gong Dai smiled faintly. His eyes were cold, and even when he smiled, there was a hint of perfunctoriness. Gong Che, on the other hand, seemed to be on the other end of the spectrum. His entire person exuded gentleness. At this moment, his hand reached out to the corridor, holding a branch of a plum tree. This flower was enchanting, and if it could be pinned to Imo-er's hair, it would be wonderful. Wedding. Gong Che's face slowly brightened. It was unknown what he thought of, but his entire person was radiant. Last time, you told Imperial Father that if you married Lu Ye's most favored princess, he was afraid that your heart would change and you would covet something that didn't belong to you. Imperial Father believed you and didn't force you to marry the princess. Today, he is choosing a girl from a scholarly family of the right age for you. Gong Dai's face darkened. He really didn't say anything when he didn't see eye to eye with him. Therefore, he turned around to leave. There was still a large group of Long Clan's women waiting to be dealt with in Zhao prison. The cries of these women were the most annoying. Wait, Gong Che suddenly called out to him. Gong Dai stopped, but he didn't turn around. Gong Dai, you and I both know that it is impossible for us not to marry. With our status, not marrying will only bring harm to her. In front of Gong Dai, Gong Che didn't need to pretend. He just loved Gong Yimo. He loved her to the point of humility. But he could pretend in front of Gong Yimo to get close to her, but he didn't want to pretend in front of his love rival. Gong Dai sneered. Is that so? Gong Che took a step forward. As long as you don't marry, Imperial Father's suspicions on her will not disappear. Do you think that Imperial Father really didn't feel anything about the farce on the sky stairway last time? Gong Dai was silent. He naturally noticed this, and so did the royal sister. She was so anxious to leave, and the emperor didn't stop her. It was all because of this. But what could he do? He just loved her. He just wanted her. He didn't want to marry. No one deserved to be connected to his name. He only belonged to the royal sister. Thinking like this, he didn't want to listen anymore. Gong Che wanted to protect the royal sister. That was his business. But marriage? He didn't agree. Don't you want to have her? Gong Dai stopped again because of Gong Che's words. He narrowed his eyes and couldn't leave anymore. He wanted the royal sister too much, so much that his heart ached. But on one hand, there was a barrier in her heart. On the other hand, she cared about what people said. It was so difficult to have her. Gong Chei's chest rose and fell slightly, but he had already made up his mind. As long as he could have her, nothing else mattered. So he continued. Immerse's nature is free and unrestrained. Although she's a girl, she has ambitions. More and more people will peep at her beauty and be subdued by her skirt. And you're so sure that she won't like any of them? Was he sure? Gong Dai's hands clenched into fists under his sleeves. He worked hard to become strong, just to be the most outstanding one. But what if the royal sister fell in love with someone else in the process? No, he couldn't accept it. At that moment, Gong Dai's eyes flashed with deep hostility. Just thinking about it made him want to kill. Kill all the men who peeped at her. And Gong Chei didn't feel good either. When they were young, Gong Dai went as Shizhou. He was the only one by Immerse's side. She only had eyes for him. She lived in a place where he could touch her. Her ears were always filled with strange voices. But her growth was so fast, much faster than them, the so-called proud sons of heaven. He wanted to have her so much, but she was getting harder and harder to control. Now that she didn't have any romantic feelings for him, he could only endure it when he wanted to get close to her. If this went on, he could forget about having her for the rest of his life. What do you want? Gong Dai finally turned around. He wanted to hear what Gong Chei wanted to do. Gong Chei looked at him with a smile, but the tenderness in his eyes was a feeling that even he couldn't suppress. He endured too much and was too tired. He didn't expect that he could only completely relax in front of Gong Dai and express his naked feelings for Immerse. It was heavy, sweet, and painful, but he was willing to do it. Now you are the most powerful prince in Dayu State. I am also the crown prince who has won the hearts of the people. In the future, if you are willing, when I become the emperor, you can be the prince regent. Gong Dai didn't care about this. He only wanted to know what Gong Chei wanted to do. Gong Chei licked his lips. His eyes were filled with undisguised passion. Immerse is already 17. She's a big girl now. His words touched Gong Dai's nerves. It made him feel more and more threatened. Gong Chei looked at him and said slowly, "But she is growing too fast. If you want to keep her, you and I can only work together." At this point, he bit his lip. He seemed to have made up his mind. "If you are willing, why can't we have her together?" Chapter 348. Gong Dai widened his eyes and frowned. "You're crazy." After he finished speaking, he wanted to leave, but Gong Chei's hearty laughter came from behind him. "Yes, I'm crazy. Aren't you crazy? Falling in love with the sister who raised you. How are you any better than me?" Gong Dai didn't want to listen anymore and continued to walk. "Gong Dai." Gong Chei stopped laughing and asked in a low voice, "Aren't you worried that you'll still be able to win her heart and dominate her line of sight? But what about me?" His voice turned sorrowful, reverberating through the long corridor as he wailed endlessly. "But what about me? I can't even express my feelings. If she doesn't accept me, will she accept you? Wishful thinking. She didn't treat you like how she treated me because you grew up with her, and she couldn't bear to see you like that. Do you really think she's moved by you?" Gong Dai stood there with difficulty. He wanted to say that he and the royal sister's hearts were connected and that she was moved, but he didn't say it. Gong Dai had no confidence in Gong Yimo. Gong Chei sneered. "If she really has you in her heart, why would she be so eager to go to Lu Yi? She's obviously hiding from you, but you don't know it." "Stop talking." Gong Dai turned around angrily. "Put away your weird thoughts. I won't hurt her. Then we'll just wait like this?" Gong Chei smiled and didn't back down, but his tone gradually became sad. "Once, I also thought that waiting would bring about results. I foolishly thought that since I loved her so much, she would at least be moved by my feelings and soften her heart a little, but she didn't." He gritted his teeth. "She's so cold to me. like a sharp knife cutting through a tangled Gordian knot. She doesn't give me a single thought. That's why there's no point in waiting. Gong Dai couldn't refute. Royal sister had a strong defense in her heart, but he didn't know why. Only plunder, Gong Che suddenly said. He was originally gentle, but now his expression was dangerous and fanatical. He looked at Gong Dai. As long as you and I work together, she can't leave us. I don't want to break her wings or hurt her, and all this won't be known by anyone, so we don't have to worry about gossip. As long as we work together. Gong Ju wanted to ridicule him and leave, but he stood there, unable to move a single step. Don't you want to completely possess her? Gong Che's bewitching voice rang out, openly soothe her skin and become one with her. His gaze became more and more fanatical. We can build a big palace to hide her. No one will know our relationship, and there won't be any obstacles. At this point, he hardened his heart. In fact, as long as you agree to work with me, I can even give her first time to you. A cold glint flashed in the depths of Gong Che's eyes. Yes, he could do this. But when the time was right, he would definitely kill Gong Dai. Imo only wanted him as a man, and that was enough. If he could get Imo, none of this mattered. He could endure it. Ridiculous. Gong Che had gone crazy. Gong Dai frowned. He must be crazy to listen to such nonsense. Seeing Gong Dai leave again, Gong Che sneered. I don't believe that you aren't afraid. Are you really that confident in yourself? Dai State, Yuheng, Luyi, Yuqi, and all the other small states. There are so many outstanding people in this world. Other than your childhood friendship with Imo, what do you have to keep her? Gong Dai walked faster and faster, wanting to leave Gong Che behind. But his martial arts skills were high, and Gong Che's soft voice entered his ears like thunder. When the time comes and she chooses someone else, even if you regret it, what can you do? Gong Dai, why don't you think about it carefully? This suggestion is still valid. Crazy. Gong Dai closed his eyes and threw his voice out of his mind. He wouldn't hurt Royal Sister. He believed that he would become the most outstanding man and become the only choice for Royal Sister. What if she fell in love with someone else in the process? Even if that person wasn't that outstanding, who could say for sure? A ghostly voice suddenly appeared in his mind. Just thinking about it made it hard for him to control his desire to kill Royal Sister. No, he wanted to see her. He wanted to stay by her side. She could only have him in her eyes. She couldn't like anyone else other than him. Gong Dai couldn't imagine what it would be like if Gong Yimo disappeared from his world. He couldn't accept any accidents. Gong Yimo felt strange in her heart. She was a little uneasy. She shook her head. In her hand was an agricultural encyclopedia. Next to her hand were a few things that were originally gray, but were now equivalent to treasures. Potatoes. She was ashamed to say that she had some fresh ingredients in her space, but not much. Other than potatoes, there were tomatoes, eggs, and chili. Fortunately, the space could keep them fresh, so there were no problems until now. The tomatoes had been eaten because they couldn't be planted, but potatoes were different at that time. She resisted the urge to fry French fries and kept these fresh potatoes. She didn't expect that they would really come in handy. These things had tenacious vitality and were abundant. Luye's geology was similar to Inner Mongolia in the future. The climate and soil in many places were suitable for growing potatoes. As she read, she felt lucky. If she didn't keep these potatoes, potatoes would only be introduced to the mainland after Columbus discovered South America. But now, she had brought this step forward by a full 7 centuries. If only there were corn, she thought greedily. In her heart, she put the matter of sailing to the sea on the agenda. She had the theory, but now she only needed to put it into practice. Because the potatoes were limited, and it wasn't even February yet, she had to consider the matter of greenhouse vegetables. There was a lot to do. On the other side, the matter of the horse ranch of the 3 kingdoms was also put on the agenda. Long Chengwuji and his ministers were discussing the feasibility of this matter. But when Gong Yimo wanted to take over the post station of the horse ranch, It was unanimously opposed by everyone. King, I think this is a conspiracy. Hua Zhouwuyo's father, Hua Zhouyi, said. How can there be people from other countries in a country? Long Chengwuji was very insistent on this matter. Regarding this matter, there is no need to mention it again. This king has already promised Gu country's princess. Moreover, there are merchants from other countries in our country. This will be the trend in the future. Hua Zhouyi was still a little unhappy. We shouldn't let a woman take the initiative. How much benefit would there be in this? Letting an outsider take advantage of it? Long Chengwuji sneered. Do you know how much trouble she, a woman, has saved us? Daiyu State, Yuheng, Lu Yi, Daiyu State. Needless to say, her words carry enormous weight. Even Yuheng, as long as it's her idea, no one will oppose it. Once trade is established, you all know how much benefit it will bring to Lu Yi. Moreover, she alone can deal with 2 countries. Why can't she take the initiative? Chapter 349. Since Long Chengwuji had said so, Hua Zhouyi did not say anything even if he was dissatisfied. His family was the main force of the horse ranch. Once the 3 Kingdoms horse ranch was established, the relay station and the horse ranch would be a big source of income. Originally, the horse ranch and relay station belonged to his family. Now that the relay station was given to an outsider, he was really unhappy. His eyes turned. If the king did not work, could he start with Gong Yimo? After the court meeting, Long Chengwuji hurried to Gong Yimo's place. There was no other reason. Gong Yimo said that today, she would show him the thing that could solve Lu Ye's food problem. Did such a thing really exist? Long Chengwuji did not believe it, but he hoped it was true. The sky, it was snowing again. Lu Ye's snow was different from Daiyu State's snow. Daiyu State's snow disappeared as soon as it touched the ground, but Lu Ye's snow was much more tenacious. In a short while, the ground was covered in a layer of snow. Is what you said true? Long Chengwuji held a potato with both hands. That kind of careful feeling was like holding a piece of tofu. This thing, is it really abundant? Can it be eaten? Gong Yimo held a pin in her mouth and frowned at the pile of paper in front of her. She spoke with a lisp. Not only can it be eaten, it's also delicious. As she spoke, she glanced at him and took away the pin. She smiled mischievously. You have to be careful. I'm using this to make seeds. I only have 10 or 20 of them. It can be said that in the entire 4 kingdoms, there won't be any more of this. Spoiling one would be a great loss. She teased him like this, and Long Chengwuji was shocked. He really treated the potato like a baby and gently placed it on the table. He felt that it was round, but he was still worried. He kept staring at it as if he was afraid that it would roll off. Gong Yimo was happy to see this, but she was not wrong. This was a foreign species, and there would not be any more of it on this continent. Then what do we do now? Long Chengwuji did not understand farming. Do we plant seeds? Shall I fetch some farmers? Gong Yimo nodded. Farmers are needed. Find a few more. I don't know much about it, but this thing can only be planted in Lu Yi in April. I want to build a greenhouse first and cultivate more seeds. Long Chengwuji nodded as if he understood. Nowadays, in Lu Yi, the staple food was millet. Because of the soil and climate here, many crops could not survive, so meat was still the dominant food. What else do you need? Long Chengwuji remembered it carefully, because he didn't understand what Gong Yimo said, so he just listened obediently. I also need some animal skins, she said with some uncertainty. In order to ensure the temperature of germination, she had to use either a greenhouse or a greenhouse. Lu Yi didn't have something like an earth dragon, so she had to make a shed to ensure the temperature. After thinking about it, in a situation where there was no plastic, animal skin was the best choice. Moreover, it needed to be thinner and then pieced together. After hearing Gong Yimo's request, Long Chengwuji didn't say anything and went to prepare the things she wanted, and he was very fast. With the help of the whole city, he quickly pieced together a long piece of thin skin. A large part of it was fresh, but it had been treated with preservative, and it still had a fishy smell on it. In winter, food was precious. According to Gong Yimo's request, they killed so many animals to get their skins, and they had to be young animals to get their skins thin. It was really a very extravagant thing to do. It was not an exaggeration to say that the value of this large piece of skin was no less than the weight of gold. Gong Yimo took a look and nodded. The skin in her hand was thin and tough, so it should be enough. Some things were carried out in a hurry. She carefully selected suitable soil and moved it into a big tent. After a period of time, she cut the sprouted potatoes in her hand, smeared the ashes on them, and planted them with a sincere attitude. However, she was very careful and didn't plant them all at once. She placed half of the potatoes in a warm place and let them germinate naturally. Seeing how King Lu Yi and the noble princess from Daiyu State treated the gray fruits like this, some of the farmers were very nervous. They repeatedly promised that they would take good care of them. However, Gong Yimo didn't listen to their words. She would come over often anyway. These were her children. Once they were grown, bringing them back to Daiyu State would be a great thing. When she thought about how she could eat French fries and potato chips in the future, Gong Yimo started to drool. King Lu Yi was also very nervous, but when he saw that she was even more nervous than him, he couldn't help but smile. His heart warmed, and he dragged her to drink. Actually, when he saw that Gong Yimo didn't eat or drink because of this matter, he wanted her to relax a little. Just like that, it was soon the new year. People were in high spirits when faced with happy events. This year, Lu Ye's new year would definitely be very lively. Longqing Wuji requested a large-scale celebration to celebrate everything going smoothly in the coming year. The whole city was cheering. Even the heavy snow couldn't cover the enthusiasm of the people. Because of the different customs, compared to Daiyu State, it was a different kind of fun. Gong Yimo was absent-mindedly drinking in the palace. The surroundings were quiet. Everyone was celebrating. Meanwhile, she was reading a book. Her heart was still thinking about the sprouted potatoes. Those little sprouts. They were the only green in Lu Yi. When Longqing Wuji came in, he saw that she was deep in thought. He smiled and pulled her to dance. The cheering outside was so loud. Didn't she hear it at all? Gong Yimo quickly got up. Let's go together. You go play. I'll go take a look at my greenhouse. Longqing Wuji suddenly glared at her. He had to maintain his dignity. It was rare for him to show his emotions on his face. What are you looking at? You've already seen it twice in the day. You can't run away. Gong Yimo was thinking about it, but she replied vaguely, What do you know? What's there to see dancing outside? It's not as good as my little sprouts. Let's go. Longqing Wuji was too lazy to talk nonsense with her. He directly dragged her away. Outside the palace was the most lively place in Huacheng. Because Longqing Wuji waved his hand and held a 3-day bonfire meat feast, many people rushed to Huacheng to enjoy this event. When Gong Yimo came out of the palace, she saw a huge bonfire that almost lit up the entire sky. The air was filled with the aroma of barbecued meat and wine. She had to admit that although Gong Dai used strong alcohol to attack Lu Ye's plot, this kind of distilled alcohol quickly became popular in Lu Yi. She tasted it. The taste was unbelievably strong. It was even harder to swallow than the burning knife she made herself. Gong Yimo was drowsy when Longqing Wuji forced her to drink a few cups. She knew that she couldn't go to the greenhouse to look at the sprouts. She could only helplessly sit by the bonfire and watch those people singing and dancing. She snorted proudly in her heart. Their dancing was so average. Such an ugly dance. She would rather look at her sprouts. Chapter 350. Commoners did not have any style when they danced, especially when they were all burly men. How beautiful could their dance be? Women, on the other hand, were even more unrestrained when they danced. Their waists twisted and turned, just like a snake showing itself. What they were eager to show was actually a kind of nature that allowed them to abandon themselves. Their hearts were free, and so was their dance. Gong Yimo was proud in her heart. While Longqing Wuji was surrounded by people, she found a corner and hid. Humph! Please don't let anyone ask her to dance such an ugly dance. She would not go. She wanted to be a quiet beauty. Princess, do you want to dance? A beautiful girl with braids invited her warmly. They had all heard about Gong Yimo's actions during this period of time from the king. If a foreign girl could do her best for Lu Yi, why couldn't they do the same? After all, the result was not important. What was important was the thought. Gong Yimo looked at her exposed chest and waist, and her mouth twitched. Finally, she said a few words in a very arrogant tone. You guys go ahead. I'm thinking about some things. Hearing such a noble answer, the girl did not continue to pester her. She hurriedly said, Please think carefully. Then she walked away, as if she was afraid of disturbing her. Gong Yimo just let out a small sigh of relief. She would not go down and shake her hips. It was too shameful. She wanted to be a quiet beauty. You don't dare, right? Suddenly, a mischievous voice came from behind. Gong Yimo turned around and saw Longcheng Wuji, who had shaken off the passionate commoners and was walking over. Seeing her hiding in the corner, he said with certainty, Don't dare? Gong Yimo exploded. She raised her chin. Is there anything in this world that I don't dare to do? Longcheng Wuji smiled and sat down beside her. He tilted his head and looked at her. Then you don't. Gong Yimo was stunned for a moment. After a while, she said angrily, Isn't it just shaking your hips? What's there to not know about such simple movements? I can do it after seeing it once. Then what are you waiting for? Let's go dance. With that, he pulled Gong Yimo and wanted to leave. Wait. Gong Yimo widened her beautiful eyes. I suddenly thought of a way to promote the growth of the seedlings. Longcheng Wuji laughed out loud. Let's talk about it after the dance. As she spoke, she dragged Gong Yimo off the stage. Jump my ass. Gong Yimo stood there with a stiff expression. The honor of her Daiyu state did not allow her to do so. Longcheng Wuji had one hand hooked onto someone else's arm, and the other hand hooked onto hers. Her other hand was passionately hooked onto by a beautiful girl, and she was forced to turn in circles. Many people were cheering at the side. The sound of percussion instruments and the melodious singing of a young girl could be heard, forming a scene of intertwining joy. And Gong Yimo was in the midst of it, like an alien. Kick. Longcheng Wuji said with a smile. Kick your sister. I won't kick you. Gong Yimo looked at them coldly as they kicked their legs. She stood there with an attitude that said, You stupid mortals. This princess will never associate with you. Go in circles. Go in circles, your sister. She would not twist her waist and turn in circles like this. It was too ugly. Gong Yimo did not cooperate, and Longcheng Wuji laughed. He pulled on her hands and forced her to turn in circles. Gong Yimo's face turned red. Even under the light of the fire, it could be seen. Gong Yimo, you're scared. His hearty laughter mixed with the clapping of the others. The people actually formed a circle around them, and Longcheng Wuji pulled Gong Yimo's hands and turned in circles. He was very fast. Gong Yimo's skirt fluttered around the bonfire, causing the crowd to cheer. Her face, on the other hand, was as red as a prawn. Mamma mia, can you not look at me anymore? Gong Yimo, your waist is still quite thin. Come, twist it a little, just a little. Gong Yimo's face was already expressionless. Seeing that his evil hands wanted to twist her waist, she quickly dodged. But with this dodge, she fell into a group of women. Longcheng Wuji's arrogant laughter could be heard in the chaos. If any of you can make her dance, this king will reward you greatly. The cheers of the young girls drowned out Gong Yimo's cries. Why did she have to dance in the crowd? Longcheng Wuji, come, let's discuss. I'll dance for you alone. Please let me off. But the young girl's enthusiasm was too much for Gong Yimo to resist. In the end, she was forced to dance in front of everyone with a face full of despair. She must have twisted her body in an unsightly manner. Don't you see how many people are laughing at her? Actually, they were not laughing at her. They really liked her. Daiyu State's dance was exquisite and dignified, while Lu Ye's dance was hot and casual. Gong Yimo was in the middle of it all and felt at a loss. But what she did not realize was that she was dancing faster and faster, and her face was gradually showing a smile. Actually, it was very simple. Longcheng Wuji held a small drum in his hand and danced beside Gong Yimou. The more Gong Yimou danced, the more joyful she became. She was like a fairy on the dance floor. Her every frown and smile was indescribably charming. The commoners were even more enthusiastic as they danced around the two of them. Their cheerful voices soared into the sky and melted the ice. In the dark, Longqing Shui revealed a malicious smile and said to the girl beside her, "Sister Wuyo, did you see that? Gong Yimou is a fairy. It's not enough that she seduced her own brother. Now she's seducing her royal brother." Flower Boat Wuyo frowned as she looked at the lively crowd. The two people dancing around the drum. They had not known each other for long, but they were like a pair of jade. The man was handsome, the woman was beautiful. One was a proud son of heaven, and the other was a proud daughter of heaven. Although she could not see his expression, Longqing Wuji's laughter was so joyful. It was something that had never happened before. Brother Wuji. He really liked Gong Yimou. Perhaps he did not realize it himself, while she, the goddess, was pushed to the side without any place to stand. Longqing Shui continued, "You are royal brother's fiancée, and Lu Ye's revered goddess. What is she, Gong Yimou? As long as you go out, the commoners will all side with you. But since she overestimated herself, we should teach her a lesson." Flower Boat Wuyo glanced at Longqing Shui. "Is it because you suffered in Gong Yimou's hands that you want to incite me to go against her?" Longqing Shui, "I am not stupid." Longqing Shui narrowed her eyes like a venomous snake staring at her. "Sister Wuyo, you are thinking too much. How could I use you? It's just that we have a common enemy. As long as you help me at the crucial moment, that will be enough." Flower Boat Wuyo looked at the crowd again. Over there, it was a lively event. Over here, it was bone-chillingly cold. After a while, she heard her own voice. Okay, Longqing Shui was at least right about one thing. This was their common enemy. Chapter 351. Under Gong Yimou's careful and scientific management, the potatoes blossomed. She spent almost every day in the big tent, checking the data and observing the growth of the potatoes. These were the experiences she needed when she returned to Daiyu State in the future. As for the matter of establishing the Three Kingdoms horse ranch, it was left to Longqing Wuji to handle. In any case, her letters had already been sent out. One was sent to Yuheng, while the other was sent to Daiyu. She believed that after Lu Yi agreed, the Three Kingdoms would be able to properly discuss the details. Gong Yimou's plan was successful, so she requested Longqing Wuji to be more generous and spread the news of the excellent horse breeds. At the very least, she wanted to ensure the quality of the horses in the 18 stud farms across the Three Kingdoms. It was a rather excessive request, but Longqing Wuji agreed. After getting his approval, Gong Yimou did not say anything else and continued to guard her little sprouts. At first glance, it was obvious that her potatoes were improved high-yield varieties. She originally only had 20 potatoes, but she used 15 of them. After they germinated, she cut them into about 100 pieces. According to the standard yield, each pit had 4 to 8 potatoes. Not counting the small potatoes, she had nearly 1,000 seeds. Just thinking about it made her excited. When the day came, it would be even more amazing. Some of Lu Ye's important officials came over. They wanted to see if the potatoes could really grow and grow. Secondly, they wanted to know if the yield was as high as Gong Yimou said. This was the most important thing. Gong Yimou was also very nervous. At this time, the cover had been lifted. People could only see the sprouts, but not the fruits. Even Longqing Wuji was puzzled. Could it be that the sprouts were food? Gong Yimou smiled and said mysteriously, "The fruits are underground." This sentence surprised everyone. Gong Yimou was already rubbing her hands and preparing to pull out the sprouts. She did not know how much she would produce. Because she was nervous, she did not even peek. Could it be that there was not even one? At this moment, she felt like she was gambling. This was the first time she was working so hard. Please don't embarrass me. With this thought, Gong Yimou reached out and pulled out a sprout. Yeah, it was quite heavy. She pulled them out all at once. At this moment, she was so happy that she almost cried. There were actually 8 of them, not counting the small ones. This sapling actually grew 8 fruits. Everyone gathered around to take a look, but Dragon City Limitless was the most shocked. He was very clear about how many seeds Gong Yimo had in her possession. In just 3 short months, she was able to obtain so many fruits. His eyes swept across the field. There were more than 100 seedlings. If each of them had such a high yield, it meant that she had used the dozen or so seeds in her hand to obtain nearly 1,000 fruits in 3 months. This could no longer be described as high yield. It was simply heaven-defying. Many of the ministers were shocked, but the most shocked were the farmers. When they saw this result, they suddenly knelt down. This lowly one doesn't need the reward. Can the king bestow a few of these divine items to this lowly one? I can't thank you enough. They were the ones who knew their value the most. Once they obtained this fruit, it meant that they would no longer have to endure the cold and hunger of winter after a year. Dragon City Limitless finally recovered from his shock. He looked at Gong Yimo and waved his hand to allow it. His original intention was to bestow these to the commoners, so that they would no longer have to suffer from hunger. 1,000 seeds was not a lot, but it wasn't a little either. But if all of them were to germinate, that would be a few thousand seeds. Then they would grow. It was now the end of April, the best time to plant. In a few months, how much would they be able to produce? If they properly maintained it, next year, their Lu Yi would no longer have to endure the cold and hunger of winter. Just as everyone was celebrating, Gong Yimo lowered her head and plucked out the seeds one by one. Almost every one of them was a high yield. This was partly because of her catalysis, but it also had a lot to do with the variety of the seeds. This thing could withstand the cold and could be stored for a long time. In a few years, no one in Lu Yi would starve to death in winter, and no one in the border city would come out of their closed-door cultivation because of hunger. This was the reason why she came to Lu Yi, and it was also what she wanted to do the most. Dragon City Limitless could no longer use words to describe his feelings. The entire tent was filled with people, and there were sounds of joy everywhere. But he only wanted to stay by Gong Yimo's side and pick up the fruits from the ground with her. Gong Yimo was very happy in her heart, but her joy was quickly overshadowed by the cheers of the crowd. And after that joy, she felt even more tired. During this period of time, she did not sleep well. Every day, she was thinking about this place. Now, she only wanted to finish this and go to sleep. Everything could wait until she woke up. Are you not happy? Looking at her calm appearance, Dragon City Limitless asked in a low voice amidst the noise. Gong Yimo turned her head and smiled back happy, but I'm a little tired. Her voice was tinged with a trace of naivety and sleepiness. Dragon City Limitless also saw the bruises under her eyes. His heart ached and he hurriedly pulled her back. How could he forget how nervous Gong Yimo was these few days? Really, he was too careless. Go and rest. I'll be here. But Gong Yimo was still not at ease. These were all her hard work for the past few months. Seeing that she was not obedient, Dragon City Limitless pulled her up. She did not rest well, and she got up too quickly. She felt dizzy and directly fell down. But Dragon City Limitless held her in his arms. Everyone listened to my orders. His voice suppressed all the joyful voices in the tent. Everyone go out and surround this place. Without my orders, no one is allowed to enter. Everyone hurriedly obeyed. That's right. These were all gold on the ground. They could not step on them, and they retreated with smiles. When they looked at Gong Yimo again, their eyes were filled with warmth, as if they were looking at their own daughter. Seeing that everyone had left, Gong Yimo still wanted to keep the seeds on the ground before leaving. But Dragon City Limitless held her up by the waist. What are you doing? She was shocked. I still have things to do. But Dragon City Limitless was very domineering. It's the same tomorrow. You have to go to sleep now. No, I can't sleep until I'm done. Put me down quickly. But Dragon City Limitless was born with godly strength. If she did not use her internal energy to push him away, How could she be his opponent? Unable to persuade Dragon City Limitless, Gong Yimo said sullenly, "All right, I don't want to do it anymore. Put me down. I'll walk by myself." There were so many people outside. How could she be carried like this? Although she was very sleepy and tired, it was comfortable to be carried like this. Thinking of this, she let out a small yawn. But Dragon City Limitless did not let go. Anyway, so many people saw it. What's the problem? Our Luyi does not have as many rules as your Dayu state. His voice came through drowsily. When it landed in Gong Yimo's ears, it was as if it was ringing in the sky. She was already sound asleep. Dragon City Limitless' heart softened, and he could not help but slow down. Chapter 352. Because it was in Luyi, and she had offended someone. So during this period of time, when she was not around, Sikong and his men were guarding there. But she was worried that someone was plotting something, and Sikong and his men would be at a disadvantage. Anyway, she was very nervous, so she could only guard there herself. And now, the result was finally out. Her heart also lightened, and she no longer felt uneasy. She actually fell asleep in Long Qingwuji's arms just a few steps away. He was tall, and in contrast, Gong Yimo was very small. She was nestled in his thick fur coat, like a little kitten. Long Qingwuji did not know how to describe his feelings. The only feeling he had was that he hoped that the road back to his residence, the longer the better. As the king of Luyi, Long Qingwuji rarely felt conflicted about anything. His character had decided that he would do what he thought, but this time, he was a little lost. Before meeting Gong Yimo, he had never thought that any girl would be so special. She had strength and decisiveness that did not lose to a man, and wisdom and talent that did not lose to a man. When she was aggressive, it made people love and hate her. When she was focused, it made people respect and admire her. When she was mischievous, it made people love and pity her. But he already had a fiancée, so he did not say anything. Perhaps this feeling would disappear in the future. As long as she left Luyi, it would disappear. The next day, when Gong Yimo woke up, the first thing she did was to go to her vegetable field to get 2 potatoes. She had not tried the taste yet, and did not know if it was good or not. Seeing that Gong Yimo wanted to use it to cook, Long Qingwuji did not want to. Long Qingwuji refused in his heart. 2 potatoes. After it sprouted, it would become the mother seed. How many fruits would it bear? But if Gong Yimo wanted to eat, he would definitely agree. He wanted to try the taste, and see if it was as good as Gong Yimo said it was. She always had seasonings in her space, so in a short while, she made a plate of fried potato strips. That smell, just by smelling it, was fragrant. After making a few more dishes, the two sat on the steps of the palace to drink. It was already evening, snow was falling, and everything was silent. Long Qingwuji was conquered by this taste, but when he looked at her face, he actually forgot to taste this rare delicacy and stared at her in a daze. Gong Yimo, why are you doing this? He asked the question that had been bothering him for a long time. Why did you bring such a magical thing to Luyi instead of contributing it to Dayu State? Snow fell on Gong Yimo's body. At this moment, she squinted her eyes like a lazy cat, with a trace of carelessness. Because Luyi is very poor. She said it as if it was a matter of fact, which almost angered Long Qingwuji to death, but he had to admit that what she said was the truth. Luyi was very poor, and Luye's people did not like to be restrained. They could ride horses to war, but it would be difficult for them to do business in the fields. However, he should not have said it out loud. Long Qingwuji said arrogantly, "That's because my people don't like those twists and turns, and they don't care about doing business." Gong Yimo smiled. "That's because Luye's people are mostly uneducated." When she said that, Long Qingwuji almost lost his face. Studying in Luyi was a very luxurious thing. When the children grew up, they would not be herding sheep or feeding horses. Why would they study? Moreover, Luyi was a nomadic people. They would not stay in a fixed place, so how could they study? Just like him, he only studied the Eagle language and Luye's history. Gong Yimo continued. They don't study because they are poor. People are constantly running around to feed their animals and their families. Who would have the time to care about whether their children study or not? Moreover, from your point of view, Louis lacks everything. They don't have any fruits, vegetables, or staple food. They don't even have salt. Therefore, you all think that in such a bad situation, poverty is inevitable. Many people feel at ease being poor. Gong Yimo. Longqing Wuji gritted his teeth. Don't think that I don't dare to hit you. He was Liu Ye's people. They were the most ambitious and the bravest people. They were the children of the eagle. Why did Gong Yimo say that they were a bunch of mediocre people who took things for granted? Isn't that the case? She glanced at him and asked. Longqing Wuji could not refute that. He thought about it and finally said angrily, but Liu Yi has no food, no salt, and it's a fact that the environment is bad. That's why Liu Yi has it harder than the people of Dayu State. It's because you have everything. Gong Yimo pinched the wine bottle between her fingers and narrowed her eyes. But have you thought about what Dayu State doesn't have? What do you have? Longqing Wuji was stunned. You have vast land. You have horses, sheep, and cows. Your fur can be seen everywhere. However, a complete fur can be sold for a good price in Dayu State. Your agate and jade are not worth much, but these can be sold for a sky-high price in Dayu State. Her voice was faint, but it seemed to be bewitching. It made King Liu Ye's eyes shine brighter and brighter. The ancients were limited by their horizons. They could not see the heights that Gong Yimo could see. Longqing Wuji was already very smart. From Gong Yimo's actions, he could infer many things. He wanted to open up a horse trade route with Yuheng. However, he only wanted to be able to buy food during the winter. He could not see anything else. It was as if he never knew that opening up the road further would bring about so many benefits. He had underestimated the benefits that trade could bring. I gave this to Liu Yi to plant because it is suitable for farming here. Moreover, it can solve one of Liu Ye's biggest problems. In a situation where you do not lack food, the people in the border towns will not harass other countries and will not rob them. She said it openly, but it made Longqing Wuji blush for no reason. Moreover, you can spread this food. This process of spreading is the process of trade. It is also a form of training. Moreover, once they start farming, Liu Ye's people will start to have a sense of land. They will not wander around like before. They will cherish their own country more and will not peep at other countries' lands. Only when the people settle down will Liu Yi have the opportunity to become emperor. So, I hope that you can farm well in the future. On the basis of being self-sufficient, you can develop and become stronger. Her voice was cold and clear. Every word was said casually. However, in Longqing Wuji's ears, it was as if she was being guided by the gods. Longqing Wuji felt as if someone had woken him up. His head hurt. Then it became very clear. Liu Yi could not become emperor. Other than being poor, the nomadic people did not have a sense of land. They were small in number and the tribes were like loose sand. They came and went like the wind. It was not easy to manage them, not to mention centralizing power. But he never thought that Gong Yimo's action, which seemed to be solving the food problem of the people, was actually solving the problem of the country's foundation. Once the people settled down and started farming, they would not be tribes anymore. They would be towns. This town would not be like now. Although it was called a town, it was actually a market for the people to exchange goods. It would be like the forcibly built Huacheng. It would be a place where the people lived. Once the people settled down, there would be a city, a county, and finally a country. Not to mention, Gong Yimo had also drawn out a trade route that spanned across the three countries. This was to let Liu Yi settle down first. Then, on the basis of stability, she would establish a road of development, so that the people of Liu Yi could change their way of life and live like the people of Dayu State. She must be a guide sent by the Eagle God. She must be. Chapter 353. Longqing Wuji did not know how to thank Gong Yimo. No matter how he thought about it, he felt that he could not repay her. So, he simply stood up and cupped his fists towards Gong Yimo. What are you doing? Gong Yimo's tone was still light and slightly surprised, but she accepted Lu Ye's salute. After the salute, Longqing Wuji was still a little confused and did not know what to say. Solving the winter food shortage, making Lu Yi the emperor, and then strengthening Lu Yi. These were his life's goals, and now he had a chance to achieve all of them. All of these were thanks to her, but he did not know how to repay her. What should I do? He frowned. I never take things for free. Gong Yimo smiled. Don't worry, I have conditions, but I only provided an opportunity. Whether you can grasp it or not is still up to you. Just like how there are many crops that are suitable for Lu Yi to grow, it's just that the yield is lower. When the people of Lu Yi settle down in the future, they will naturally find them. But this process is very long. It's not something that can be solved by me. Longqing Wuji shook his head seriously. It's you who gave them a chance to settle down. Gong Yimo covered her mouth and laughed. I have my own selfish motives too. Longqing Wuji could not tell at all what selfish motive she had in this matter. Gong Yimo smiled like a little fox. Other than what we agreed on, I can make a request. Once trade is established, the people of Dayu State will be able to spend very little money to buy suitable fur, and the borders will no longer be guarded against people who want to take advantage of them. Her laughter made Longqing Wuji flustered. He wished he could give an order to not let anyone disturb the borders of other countries. In the end, Gong Yimo's expression turned serious. Looking at him, he spoke slowly and forcefully, one word at a time. You have to believe that it's not necessarily a good thing for one country to be the strongest. It's not necessarily a bad thing for you if others are doing well. If you care too much about gains and losses, you'll only lose more. A win-win situation is the best outcome. Her words seemed very simple, but they were also very profound. It was like a complicated secret text, one word after another entering his soul, leaving a deep imprint. He never knew that there would be a woman with such a broad mind and vision. Just as she said, if she cared about gains and losses, she could vent her anger on Lu Yi for what Wu You and Ting Shui had done to her and refused to help. It was precisely because she didn't look at the problem within herself, but at the whole world that she selflessly helped Lu Yi solve his problem. Such magnanimity was deeply impressive. Gong Yimo looked at his rare dazed look and smiled gently. Do you remember that you still owe me a favor? Say it. As long as I, Lu Yi, can do it, I'll do it. He said these words resolutely and decisively. Gong Yimo thought for a moment, then looked at the sky and sighed softly. If it's possible, I want you to set an iron law when you become an emperor in the future. The word emperor made Longqing Wuji's heart skip a beat. In the past, he felt that it was unattainable, but now it seemed that it was just so. Say it. His voice was so dry and hoarse. Gong Yimo pursed her lips and smiled. Her eyes were clear and bright, as if they could contain all things. Unless there's an enemy, there won't be any war within 100 years. She blinked and looked at Longqing Wuji. After the country is established, are you willing to set this iron law? Her voice was very soft, but each and every word was as heavy as 1,000 pounds. Longqing Wuji couldn't help but look at her deeply, as if he wanted to look into the depths of her soul. She seemed to understand Lu Ye's nature better than he did, and also understood people's hearts better. The oath of the founding of the country was an iron law that must be obeyed, unless you don't establish the country. Many countries declared themselves emperors when they ascended the throne would leave behind a promise to lead their people to prosperity. Gong Yimo, on the other hand, had asked him to establish such an iron law. It wasn't even because of fear. It was because she had a weapon that everyone yearned for, so she wasn't afraid of Lu Ye's army. But she wanted Lu Yi to make this oath because she wanted peace in the world, at least for 100 years. As if she was afraid that he wouldn't agree, Gong Yimo continued. After Dayu State's crown prince inherits the throne, I will also ask him to make a 100 years agreement. When brother Kim Yun inherits the throne, I will also ask him to make a 100 years agreement in exchange for the rights and interests of Golden Jade Bank. As for Yu Qi, I will also ask them to agree to this request. This is an agreement between the 4 countries, and it's a flourishing agreement. Do you agree? What a good agreement between the 4 countries. What a flourishing agreement. Longqing Wuji suddenly smiled. His teeth were very white, and when he smiled, his beautiful blue eyes narrowed. It was especially dazzling, like the sun. I agree. Gong Yimo's eyes lit up when she heard this. She reached out her small hand and clapped it to make an oath. Longqing Wuji understood immediately. He reached out his large hand and clapped it lightly with her small hand. This evening, this simple, yet new history was established. It was also the most dazzling stroke in the history of Liu Ye's country. Time passed quickly. Liu Ye's summer seemed to come especially late. When the first batch of people cheered for their harvest, Gong Yimo was also about to leave Liu Yi. She felt that this trip was quite successful. At least after that time, Longqing Ting Shui didn't appear again. This made her very satisfied. And as the farming exchange deepened, the people of Liu Yi liked Gong Yimo more and more. They felt that she was beautiful and didn't put on airs. She answered all questions and had a good temper. So when they knew that she was leaving, the joy of the harvest was reduced by a lot. Gong Yimo didn't know whether to laugh or cry. That's the basic method. You can develop the rest yourselves. Gong Yimo smiled and told him some potato methods she knew. She didn't forget to remind him. Now that the three countries have begun to trade, you can also go to other countries to take a look. There are more species suitable for Liu Yi. The burly man dressed like a farmer nodded repeatedly, indicating that he remembered. Thinking of something, Gong Yimo said again, choose a dry place to preserve the fruit. Don't eat it if it sprouts. It's poisonous. Yes, yes. He smiled and nodded repeatedly. Gong Yimo then turned to leave. The weather was a little hot, but it wouldn't be long before she returned to the country. When that time came, she could go to the mountain resort. Soon, the farewell banquet arrived as scheduled. The entire palace was very lively. Gong Yimo was forced to drink cup after cup of wine. She thought that she might have to sleep in the carriage the next day. Longqing Wuji was a little melancholy. At this moment, many women in white suddenly ran in. Each of them had a murderous look. They looked at Gong Yimo as if they were looking at an enemy. Longqing Wuji put down his cup heavily. What's the matter? At this moment, the leading woman walked out quickly. It was Flower Boat Wuyo. She looked anxious. Cousin, quickly take this woman down. She's here to harm us. She's Liu Ye's enemy. You're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.